we have also invested in extensive maintenance, repair, and energy efficiency work across our portfolio of city-managed buildings. To support these efforts, our fiscal year 26 budget includes $152.8 million to support cleaning, maintenance, and repair work across DCAS-managed buildings, and $110 million to achieve the city's climate goals as outlined in Executive Order 89 of Local Law 97. In addition to these programs, every year DCAS generates a significant amount of revenue on the city's behalf. In fiscal year 26, our annual revenue target is $63.7 million, primarily due to three areas: $44.7 million in private rentals of city-owned properties, DCAS's largest source of recurring revenue, $9 million for the sale of surplus vehicles and other city-owned equipment, and $4.8 million from applicant filing fees for civil service exams. The final piece of our budget is our capital plan, or the funds allocated towards upgrading and renovating our infrastructure. This preliminary budget reflects an updated 5-year plan of $8.8 billion from fiscal year 25 to fiscal year 29, including $5.5 billion for projects managed by DCAS. This plan includes maintenance and enhancements to DCAS facilities, the renovation of leased spaces, and continuing our energy conservation and fleet electrification work. The preliminary budget for DCAS managed projects in fiscal year 26 is $1.2 billion and includes $724.5 million of energy conservation and green energy projects, $382.9 million to support our capital construction program for city-owned offices and court buildings, $17.8 million for information technology system upgrades to improve our human capital front-end systems, internal agency application support, and the modernization of our civil service exam system infrastructure. And lastly, $39 million for fleet electrification work. In closing, I want to thank the Council for its partnership and for providing me with the opportunity to testify. I look forward to working with each of you to improve our operation and advance our mission. With that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Great. Thank you very much, Commissioner, for your thoughtful and thorough testimony. I meant to mention this in my opening, but I have a great deal of respect for the DCAS staff and have had the privilege of working with many people over the years at DCAS, including yourself in various roles, to solve problems for New Yorkers. And I was just informed that Executive Deputy Commissioner Beatrice Thuo is leaving DCAS, and I just wanted to say thank you for your service. It's been a pleasure working with you, learning from you, and your contributions to the city over many years here and at HBD, are just a model of civil service. And so thank you for all your work, truly. With that, I am going to offer Councilmember Carr the chance to begin, and then I'll jump in after.
Thank you so much, Chair, Commissioner. Always good to see you.
Good morning.
Good morning. I wanted to focus in a little bit at the start about the reimbursement program for non-public schools security guards. The Council recently passed legislation that was enacted to expand eligibility for that program, and that'll begin with the start of the coming fiscal year. And so my question to you is, do you feel like you have a handle on the likely increase in eligible applications that are going to come the agency's way, and do you feel like the appropriation in the preliminary budget is sufficient to cover that need in total?
Yeah, I'm confident that we'll be able to handle it. And DC Middleton, can you just walk through some of the details of that for the council member?
Yes, thank you, council member. Like the commissioner said, we're gearing up and getting ready. We've opened the application period. Applications opened up on March 1st. Currently, the allocation for fiscal year 26 has not yet been added, but we are in conversations with OMB, and we expect them to add that funding.
Okay, and you'll be speaking to OMB in real time if the application volume is unexpectedly high, and when does the application window close?
May 15th.
May 15th, so roundabout time for executive budget and for us to have that as information before us. So would you be able to get the committee and the council the full number of applications and the full appropriation required to meet it once that information is available?
Yes, definitely.
I appreciate that. My next question is about, some of the properties that we have on Staten Island that's in the DCAS inventory. None of them are rented to tenants who have been there for a long time. A number of them are municipal lots for parking. Can you give us any kind of sense of whether there's any plan changes or vision for those sites, or is there a commitment to, maintaining the current uses as is?
Yeah, so I think there's a commitment depending on if there's going to be a change in those uses to figure out if that change makes sense for the city and also the community as well, that those lots may be in. We have been doing a review within real estate to look at what lots may be viable to possibly put up for lease auction, and evaluating those properties with our new Executive Deputy Commissioner Overton, who oversees asset and property management. But we're in close communication with community leaders throughout the city regarding any sort of real estate opportunities that may exist for communities, nonprofits, and others.
And when do you expect that internal review to conclude?
Yeah, so we just recently had a meeting a couple of weeks ago, and we're happy to sort of work with you if there are any specific lots within your district that you think you have some ideas on. Obviously there may be a ULUP process that may be involved with that, and we'd work closely with you to sort of figure that out.
I appreciate that. And then I guess my last area of questioning is about, the posting of civil service exam lists. I think in past hearings, we've been focusing on, whether we could do more hiring. Obviously, there's a great need across different agencies in order to do that. And so could you tell us how, whether or not you have sufficient staff and operational support in order to process these exams and post those lists in a quick amount of time? Because the sooner they're out there, the sooner the agencies can begin hiring off them. And then I guess my final question is, the agency in the beginning of the administration did a number of hiring halls around the city. I think one was in partnership with my office. And do you think that there is enough in the preliminary budget for hiring halls in the coming fiscal year that could be done on Staten Island and Brooklyn and other places?
No, thanks for your question. So I think, like the mayor has said, I think we have to go to where the people are to tell them about the opportunities that exist in the city. And at the beginning of hiring halls, DCAS was spearheading that work. The work of hiring halls has transitioned to City Hall, NYC Talent, and the Small Business Services. The good thing I'll say about that is that it has expanded not only for city job opportunities with the city, but also career opportunities with the private and the nonprofit sector also attend those hiring halls. We at DCAS have enough funding for our Office of Citywide Recruitment to support those efforts. We attend many of these hiring halls and do a lot of tabling. We also, if space permits as well as time, conduct Civil Service 101 presentations to those that are looking for career opportunities within the city. And just yesterday, in supporting NYC Department of the Aging, we had a hiring hall in Brooklyn that was geared towards seniors in our communities. So I think hiring halls are one part of a very important strategy to make candidates, and especially New Yorkers, aware of what job opportunities are available, and we fully support them.
Okay, and with respect to the publishing of civil service exams?
Thank you for reminding me that.
No, it's okay.
Yeah, so in the last fiscal year, we did have really good headway in the turnaround of the publishing of exam lists. But I think it's important to know that many of those exams were qualified incumbent exams, and those are exams, but they're very different from education and experience exams and multiple question exams. So there's a shorter window to turn around those exams, and that drew our turnaround time date very, very low. We are at about 160 days right now, which is still under our 197-day target. So we look to get these exam lists out as quickly as possible. But we do provide preliminary lists so that our agencies have a sense of some of the candidates that are going to be coming their way once the list is certified, so they can begin to do some sort of recruitment efforts to shorten the window of time frame when they want to bring candidates on.
I appreciate that, Commissioner. Thank you for answering my questions.
Yeah.
Chair, thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Carr. Always good to see you. I would like to start with sustainability, but we have DCAS is an exceptional agency. You guys do so much important work, so we've got a lot of different areas that we'll cover today, but sustainability is very much, and I would just like to acknowledge my colleague and friend, Councilmember Gutierrez, who's with us online. Climate change, of course, is an existential threat, and the city should be leading the way in helping to combat it, especially as we're mandating compliance on the private sector. Local Law 97 mandates that the city reduce greenhouse gas emissions by approximately 40% for large buildings. In late 2023, DCAS testified that the city was no longer on track to meet the goal of 40% reduction in city greenhouse gas emissions by 2025. Now, you had testified that you were on track to meet that goal by 2027. Today, you testify we're only 26% of the way toward achieving that goal. So we've got a long way to go. My understanding is that in FY24, we only reduced the greenhouse gas emissions by 26,626 metric tons, 66% of the original target of 40,000 metric tons. And over the past 3 fiscal years, the city has cumulatively 23,000 tons behind our goal of reduced greenhouse gas emissions. The goal for FY25 is, again, 40,000 tons of greenhouse gas emissions. Are we on track to meet the 40,000 greenhouse gas emission reduction goal for FY25?
So I'll just talk about why we missed the target a little bit. So, we do expect, and I just want to reaffirm to you as chair and the rest of the council members, that we're going to hit the 40% by fiscal year 2027. For me, when I came on DCAS, this has been an all-hands-on-deck effort to keep pushing the needle down on our emissions. We did face some headwinds prior to that, most of which was out of our control, including a number of delays that were connected to COVID. The state's grid did get dirtier due to the closure of Indian Point Energy Center. And then we had equipment and lead time supply chain issues for procurement timelines. And there were obviously budgetary pressures as well that we have to just recognize. But we are committed to meeting that goal by fiscal year 2027. As you stated, we are 26% from where we were on our baseline in fiscal year 06. We have reduced overall energy uses in our building operations, which I think is also important, by 14% compared to the 5-year average of fiscal year 06 to 10. So we are driving down energy consumption in our buildings. We're doing everything we can to electrify our building systems. We're pursuing large comprehensive retrofit projects with significant GHG reduction. We've been doing a lot of decarbonization of our city's fleet, and we're investing in clean energy generation at city-owned buildings. So we do have a plan. We're on target to hit that plan. So that's why I'm confident we'll hit it by 40% by fiscal year 27, and our larger goal of 50% by 2030.
So I appreciate that response. The goal is to reduce 40,000 this year, 40,000 greenhouse gas metric tons this year. We've got about 110,000 to go to reach that goal by FY27. If I have those numbers right, please correct me. Please walk me through, are we on track to meet the 40,000 goal for this current fiscal year? And what's the pathway to reduce the further 110,000 greenhouse gas metric tons by FY27?
So to walk you through a more technical version of how we meet that goal, I'll hand it over to our Deputy Commissioner of Energy Management.
Good morning.
Oh, you need to be sworn in. I apologize.
Can you please raise your right hand? Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, and respond honestly to council member questions today?
I do.
Thank you.
Could we do all the deputy commissioners at
Yeah.
once? Could we just do all? Could we do all your deputy commissioners at once so we don't have to do it a bunch of times?
Can you please raise your right hands?
Yeah. Would you mind standing? I apologize. I think that's what we're supposed to do. I apologize.
Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, and respond honestly to council member questions today? I do. Thank you.
Thank you. Sorry about that. Just figure we don't need to do it for every single topic we go through. Go ahead.
Okay. So your first question was whether we will meet our 50,000 metric tons for fiscal year 25.
40,000 metric ton goal for
40,000.
FY25. That's right.
That's right. And we are on target to meet that goal for 25.
Good. And walk me through the pathway to 27 for the 110,000 that we have outstanding, because I think the commissioner testified that we're 26% of the way to our goal. We've got a ways to go. Could you walk me through?
Yeah, and that number, the 26%, is based on fiscal year 2023. We still have, a few years to go. Our pipeline, we have a lot of projects in our pipeline. And those projects are intact. We're going, they're moving as fast as possible, and they are on track to be completed on time. And
Do you want to talk me through at a high level, what are the big picture projects that are going to have the most significant impact in achieving our goal?
Yes, we have a lot of projects in the pipeline. We shared them with you last time. I'll go over them again here. There are large projects in your district as well.
I'd love to hear it.
Just give me a second.
I'll give you a second.
Yeah.
Before I pepper you with more questions.
Yes. Here we go. Okay, I'll start with the projects in your district. There is a gravity belt thickener that involves thermal energy storage installation at the Newtown Creek wastewater treatment plant that will reduce GHG emissions by 18,000 metric tons. Another one in your district is the Brooklyn Criminal Court. That one has, it's a partial electrification upgrade and includes installation of an advanced energy management system and solar as well. And there's another one, the Brooklyn Appellate Court.
Say that again, the Brooklyn which court?
The appellate court.
Appellate
court, which will include installation of heat pump, water heaters, air source heat pump system with energy recovery and other miscellaneous HVAC upgrades.
Great. We love the in-district projects. Happy to hear that you're on track broadly, and I'll dig in on a couple of these capital plan changes. But I did just want to ask at a high level, my understanding was that the most consequential thing that we're doing is Chippy. Is that right?
Correct.
So, I'll do a slight preamble. DCAS purchases 3.9 billion kilowatt hours of electricity annually for city buildings. 48.7% of our energy use is, of course, electricity. As we work to meet our sustainability goals, we'll be relying even more on electricity, and a major part of our plan to lower electricity costs is reliant on the Champlain Hudson Power Express, Chippy, which is scheduled to be coming online in May of 2026. Indeed, the City of New York is expected to be the anchor purchaser of this renewable energy flowing into New York City. I've been a supporter of Chippy. My mom grew up in Quebec, in Montreal. I know that not everybody up there is as enthusiastic as I am, but I think it's a very worthwhile project and a good thing for the City of New York. How much does DCAS expect Chippy to lower electricity costs? Or have you been able to model that?
So the Chippy actually is going to be a REC purchase, so it is going to be an increase in cost.
Okay.
But the benefits, of course, are beyond the financial.
And I've been asked, you're not the first person I've asked this question at preliminary budget hearings. I think you're the third, but I haven't gotten a good answer yet, so we'll see if today's the day. Have you begun discussing with colleagues internally the impacts of the potential Canadian tariffs on the city's electricity bills and what the potential costs will be for us?
Yes, as you know, the situation is very fluid at this point, right? And even the state issued a report saying the same thing. There's a lot of unknowns. And, the big part of it is that it's not even certain that electricity sales will be part of the tariff. But if it does, it's not affecting the construction of Chippy. It is still on track to be completed by the spring of 2026.
Right. And as I said, I think it's a good thing that we're doing, that we are the anchor purchaser for Chippy and that we've supported this. And I think the City of New York's leadership from the previous administration in advancing this has been instrumental in it happening. But as you noted, it will lead to an increase in costs. And if there's a potential 25% tariff that's imposed on this electricity, which is a very real threat, it could be a major challenge for our electricity budget at DCAS. Is that right?
It does increase the cost, but at the same time, we were doing all these other things that help reduce the cost, including demand response, right, and energy efficiency project, which are, with the goal to reduce energy consumption. So,
can I ask, have you been talking to OMB, to state legislative affairs, governor's office, federal affairs about the impact that these tariffs could have on this project and electricity costs for the city? Are we sounding an alarm bell that this could be severely problematic for the city's finances?
Our understanding, it's not going to be significantly affecting the pricing. The report came out actually 2 days ago from the state saying the same.
Okay.
But we continue the discussion with OMB, and as we get clarity on what the tariff looks like, of course, we're going to continue the discussion and see the impact there.
Great. That's helpful. I appreciate the answers. The capital plan, which you began to cite a few projects in District 33, which we're, of course, excited about, included a number of adjustments in the 5-year plan for energy efficiency and sustainability projects. Notably, we saw a $175 million reduction in a lump sum payment to the SCA, $23 million reduction in solar panel systems, $56 million reduction for energy efficiency funding under 1NYC, $15 million reduction for the DOE direct install lighting program, $23 million reduction for citywide resiliency measures. Could you, at a high level, help explain why these adjustments were made and what impact they will have on our emission reduction goals? If we were to fight to restore these funds, and last year we had a lot of success pushing from the City Council to restore some of the mayor's proposed cuts to these sustainability capital projects, what impact would that have on achieving our goals?
Hi, Councilmember. Just to clarify, the reductions you're seeing are likely reallocations. So typically, once we submit our request to OMB, the amount of unallocated funds is reduced, and then it's reallocated to an actual project. Okay. So there were a number of new projects actually added for DEM in this plan, and we can submit that to you offline if needed.
We would love that. We'd love to chance to review the new projects that you're looking at, and we can share with you what we're seeing on the reductions and would be helpful to better understand if those funds were reallocated or pushed to out years or what exactly is going on there. And then I think that the best way to do this is maybe to follow up in writing, but I appreciated that you just mentioned a few projects. Last year, you gave us a list of the 10 largest projects in terms of emission reduction impacts. And I would love if you'd be able to provide that same update on our top 10 projects and the timeline for kind of completion on those projects so that we can just better understand how we're doing on each of those projects. I might just highlight a few today. The Wards Island Water Resources Recovery Facility digester tank reconstruction, I believe, was the largest impact. Is that still the case, and what's our timeline for completion there?
It's still on track, yes. It's
okay.
Still going.
And let me ask just about a couple that we couldn't find. Last year you mentioned the Manhattan garages. I assume that was Disney. We couldn't find that in the Manhattan garages was what was listed as an important project. Does that ring a bell for you?
57th Street Garage is a project that we are implementing. I'm not sure about the Manhattan, but I can get back to you on it.
Okay, we'll get back. We'll share what you gave us last year in writing. Okay. There were a few that we could not find in the updated capital project listing, so we just wanted to understand the Cannonsville Reservoir, the Queens County Family Court, Catskill Delaware Interconnect, to cite a few that we just we're looking for more information. But that's great. I covered Chippy. One more question on sustainability, and then we can shift gears. I have been saying to my staff for some time that, I am profoundly concerned about the shifting federal landscape of offshore wind and the impact that that's going to have for the city of New York on our ability, and the state of New York on our ability to achieve our climate reduction, our climate goals. I think we need to begin shifting for at least the next few years, considering it doesn't appear that offshore wind is going to move forward in any way, thinking about new approaches to expand renewable energy. It feels like we're potentially at a moment for more focus on geothermal. We have a large 1,000-unit tower going up in the Greenpoint waterfront that's powered with geothermal energy. Could you share with us what projects DCAS is working on with geothermal, and do you think there's an opportunity for us to expand both our city's carbon, the city of New York, as the government's carbon greenhouse gas reduction goals through more reliance on geothermal and beyond?
Yeah, we're always looking for new technologies, right, to accelerate our project and the reduction of GHG emissions. We are starting to look into geothermal, but I don't think it's a technology it's going to be, I shouldn't say much about it because we're in the process of evaluating if it's something we should look into and implement. But we had one geothermal, actually no, it was more of a thermal energy storage. That's not what you're asking. But I can get back to you on
Yeah.
If there is any opportunity anywhere to implement.
I just, you are in such an important position as a purchaser, right? And to be able to help shape the market, and on behalf of the city of New York, we have a clean energy hub that's getting built in Vinegar Hill that Con Ed is working on that was supposed to bring in enough offshore wind energy to power half of Brooklyn. And so we're not talking, I love the solar panel projects and everything, but we're not talking about a few solar panels on a roof that represent this much energy. We're talking about half of Brooklyn. Like, this is the transformational stuff that actually allows us to meet our climate goals. And that stuff, as far as I can tell, it's all dead in the water. Oh, I guess it's a good fit of dead in the water since it's offshore wind. There you go. I guess decast humor. GovOps humor is probably more appropriate. I really think that we need to just be focusing on what other renewable energy sources we can realistically benefit from in the immediate future. And I really do hope that we can do more to evaluate opportunities around geothermal. And if there are ways that the council can be helpful or supportive in those efforts, please let us know.
Point well taken. Thank you.
Thank you. I would love to shift to hiring. And I was just supposed to ask for you to say your name and title for the record.
Sana Barakat, City Chief Decarbonization Officer and Deputy Commissioner of Energy Management at DCAS.
I think you have the best title in city government, right? Okay, we have been joined by Council Members Vernikoff, Council Member Hanif online, and former GovOps Chair Gail Brewer in person. All right, we will shift gears to hiring, unless you have questions. You good? We'll shift gears to hiring if that's okay. Of course, this is one of DCAS's most important functions, serving as the hiring and recruitment manager for all city agencies. Our city cannot operate without hardworking civil servants, and we're dependent on DCAS to ensure that we are fully staffed and able to meet expectations of New Yorkers. But there are currently 15,000 vacancies in city government, a vacancy rate of about 5%. Prior to the pandemic, the city vacancy rate was under 2%. When Mayor Adams took office, the vacancy rate was 8%, so you might think that there's an improvement. But that's only because the mayor has permanently cut 10,000 positions from the budgeted headcount. Adding those positions back in, and the vacancy rate jumps back to 8%. If this sounds familiar, it's because I raise this at every hearing. We don't seem to be making progress. Are you concerned about the persistent levels of vacancies in city government? Is there a larger strategy on how we're going to effectively combat this?
So thank you for the question. I'll just begin before our Deputy Commissioner for Human Capital jumps in. But we have been more agile to respond to the needs of our agencies. So as you know, we have a target of about 185 civil service exams a year. And when agencies forecast that they may have hiring issues that they project into the future, we can always add exams to those schedules. In addition to that, our Office of Citywide Recruitment helps to support recruitment efforts not only at agencies, but also to support the ongoing efforts of the hiring halls as well. We are evolving with the changing landscape of today's job market, a different sort of generation of worker that wants more portability within their career, and we've been adapting to those changes. With that, for more technical, I'll have passed it over to Deputy Commissioner of Human Capital, Katrina Porter.
Good morning. So Councilmember Ressler, examinations continue to be the cornerstone of our recruitment efforts to support city agencies. We are currently in the process of developing our examination schedule for fiscal year 26, where we're engaging agencies to understand their recruitment needs so that we can support them in the future.
Can I just ask on that? I was really impressed in the PMMR to see the number of applications for civil service exams increase so much. I think it was 71,000 in the first 4 months of this year compared to about 40,000 last year. So, 80-something% increase. Very impressive. What do you attribute that to?
So we opened application periods for one of our large-scale exams, firefighter, which mostly contributed to the increase in applications.
Do you know the numbers? What number of that was firefighter?
We received upwards of 40,000 applications for firefighter.
Okay, so that is the whole increase.
Yeah.
Okay. Sorry, I interrupted you. If you want to continue, or I can keep peppering you with questions.
Yes, I was going to mention that we also support agencies by encouraging them to participate in our pathway programs, which are exempt from, the current 2-for-1 hiring procedure, our civil service pathway fellowship program. Application and matching for that program is currently underway. We expect to onboard about 91 new fellows as a part of that program in April. And so just looking for, creative ways to support agency hiring where feasible.
As with Councilmember De La Rosa, we had a hearing on this not too long ago that highlighted some of these issues and our concerns, but I'd like to just dig into them again a little bit here. The PMMR showed the number of days it takes DCAS to get from exam administration to issuing results increased to 163 days, up from 115 days in the previous year. So that's, close to a 30-something% increase we're talking about. And that's only to results, not when it applies. It doesn't, that's not for when someone's actually getting a job offer, right? So 163 days, we're talking about 5 months just to get your results on an exam. Oof. At our hearing in November, we discussed it's taking 14 to 15 months from when an applicant takes an exam to when they're actually getting hired. We heard from DEP that everyone that recently got called on an engineering list declined the opportunity. Has DCAS done analysis of how often this is happening? We think in part because of the delays and just how slow and painful the process is. We're losing folks. Are you looking at this? Can you offer any insight into what may be occurring?
So what I can say is for titles that are hard to recruit where agencies may have a hiring need, we are able to provide them with passers lists well before the exam is officially established so that they can engage these candidates in the process and to keep them excited about the work that, that the agency, and the agency's mission and vision, right? But there's no way for us to understand why folks are not, showing up for the interview process, what we call a fail to report. But there are notices that the agencies have to provide these candidates to, inform them of the ability to restore themselves to the list. And, we provide agencies with training on the civil service list call process so that they are aware of what they need to do.
Do you track how long OMB takes to approve agencies, to give approval to agencies for positions from when they make an offer to when they actually, from when the agency makes an offer to when they actually get hired?
No, DCAS does not track that process. That's
Would you
at the agency
consider
level.
tracking in the MMR kind of end-to-end recruitment to hiring so that we have a better vision of the whole, because that's the goal, right? Your goal here, and I know you have a tough job, especially when OMB stonewalls you every step of the way, but the goal is to get people into jobs. Isn't that the outcome that we should really be tracking?
So what I can say is we are looking for ways to use our NICAP system to better track the time to hire, but that the process between when an agency requests OMB approval to when they receive that really happens at the agency level. I'll take it back and we'll figure out if we can, better coordinate with agencies to understand that process.
I just think we would all be better served. You guys, we have you under a microscope for the portion that you're responsible for, but we don't hold the agencies or OMB, we don't have that same window into their timeframes and have them, and are unable to hold them accountable in a similar fashion. You're measured in the PMMR and the MMR and the DMMR all the time of how many exams you're issuing, how long it's taking to get those exams processed, right? And the rest of the process is far more opaque. Is that, do you think that characterization is fair?
I think we're making strides in standardizing hiring processes across the city through our HR transformation process, where we're looking at our forms and how we engage employees at orientation to build a more standardized process. We've been at this for about a year. We've made tremendous strides, and we will continue to do so.
And that sounds helpful. I still think we need the data to be able to measure ourselves and to hold ourselves accountable. We had OMB testify before us 2 weeks ago that they give responses to agencies in 2 weeks from when an agency sends a PAR over and they get 2 weeks for approval. Have you ever had a response from OMB in 2 weeks for an agency PAR?
Not that I'm aware of, but DCAS proper would be able to speak better to that.
Yeah, I didn't think so. But I appreciate your honesty. I'd like to shift to hiring halls, which I just have to say I thought was one of the really wonderful, cool things that DCAS had been doing, and loved you all taking the lead on it, and thought that they were really successful. Why has DCAS moved away from city government-focused hiring halls?
So DCAS, we're here to support the overall hiring hall effort being led by SBS. So our role is to encourage city agencies to participate in the hiring events by providing them with information about when and where these events will be happening. DCAS, Office of Citywide Recruitment, they're also in attendance at these events to provide information about civil service jobs.
Are you able to compare the results from how we were doing on the city government-focused hiring halls that had been a big focus of, I think, year 2 of the Adams administration versus these more private sector-oriented hiring halls where the city is just one of many?
So what we can track is the engagement at our tables when we are when we are attending the hiring halls. We track the traffic that, the folks that we engage at our tables, we do track that number, but overall, that information is being handled by SBS.
Okay. And at our hearings, we've heard, and in our conversations with city agencies, we've heard from housing and human services agencies about that they want, health agencies, that they want hiring halls. They want the model back that you all had successfully pioneered. Have you heard those requests? Have you received any of those requests from city agency partners?
We're in constant contact with city agencies. We host, title-specific hiring events often, and we're always more than willing to support agencies in that way. So we can definitely maybe ask the question.
Yeah.
See
I mean,
if we can
when
support
we
them.
had our budget hearing last year, and remind me, how long have you been in this position? It's about that long?
For almost 2 years now.
2 years. Okay. So my recollection was that there was cuts to the team. There was cuts from funding to the team that was responsible for overseeing and implementing the hiring halls. Am I remembering that correctly? That there was cuts about a year ago?
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay.
The hiring hall was an all hands on deck event at DCAS, so all DCAS employees kind of pitched in. So there wasn't really a set team.
Well, I have some more questions on federal government stuff. I'll just close on the hiring hall piece to say, I really think this was one of the more innovative things that happened in the Adams administration, and it was working. And people really appreciated it, and city government jobs are great jobs, and we connect people to stable careers, especially people of color, moderate income backgrounds, to really good, steady, stable careers. And we've stopped that recruitment. And I realize there's some efforts afoot, but it's nothing like what had been happening, and it's just a hugely missed opportunity. So I hope that you all consider bringing them back and that you get the resources to do so, because I think you were doing a great job. And when the hiring hall came to District 33, I was not asked to co-sponsor it. The mayor asked all the other elected officials to co-sponsor it, but I still was happy that it was happening in my community, even if they didn't want my name on it.
Councilmember, if I could just add, I think, from my perspective, I think what we have seen really is an expansion of that effort to connect New Yorkers to jobs, not only jobs that are available in the city, but jobs that may be available in nonprofits, jobs that may be available in the private sector. I've attended a number of these more expansive hiring halls with my SBS commissioner colleague, and there's a lot of engagement. We've also expanded on those that may be eligible for city purposes or a 55A program that may have disabilities, and we're making those accommodations as well. Appreciate your feedback and always how we can support to enhance those efforts done by NYC Talent and SBS. And we also, our human capital team meets monthly with the agency personnel officers.
Right.
And whenever they engage with us to tell us they have an issue specifically about a particular title where they're having a tough time recruiting, we will be there and prepared to help them have specific hiring halls
Yeah.
for those titles.
But Commissioner, the challenge we have is that when we do these hiring halls that are mostly private sector oriented, nonprofit oriented, they can hire people in a week. We just talked about a process with the civil service exam where it's taken an average of 14 to 15 months to get somebody hired. Or if we have agencies that don't need to be hiring off a list, best case scenario, it's still 3 to 6 months before somebody's actually starting a job. If you get an offer, you don't have work, and you get an offer that you can start in 2 weeks or you can start in 6 months, you got to put food on the table, right?
No, I
There's no
get it. I
choice
mean,
at all.
it's a
And our
competitive
job
market.
as DCAS and GovOps, we're focused on how do we make sure that the vacancy rate in city government is down? How do we make sure that every city agency is properly staffed? I want SBS and the talent folks to do their job too, but I don't want to compete. And I want you all to continue to be laser focused on making sure that city agencies have the resources and the staffing that they need to thrive. And I just think that we get lost in the shuffle in these new approach to hiring halls. I've heard from city agencies they don't find it nearly as effective as the previous hiring hall model that they were really enthusiastic about. I've had conversations with Henry Garrido going back 5 years on wanting to see hiring halls just like this. I think there's a lot of enthusiasm from labor, from labor unions across New York City, from city government, and from city agencies. And it's just, I think there's OMB put resource constraints on DCAS that made this impossible. I said that, you didn't say that. But I wish that you all had the resources, and we should continue to push for the resources for you all to be able to be the robust recruitment arm that the city desperately needs.
I appreciate your support.
Thank you. I'm going to just, on federal government issues, we've obviously seen a massive shrinking of the federal government. These, Deputy Commissioner Porter, may be for you too, I don't know, just in case you don't get too comfortable. We've seen a massive shrinking in the shrinkage in the federal government over the last 3 months, and it seems like things are getting worse every day. What are we doing to target federal workers to help fill vacancies in city government? And then I just have a couple specific questions. Have you examined whether job qualification requirements adequately consider federal service so that we're making it as easy as possible for formal federal employees to qualify for city positions? And relatedly, I'm really interested in understanding if we've reviewed federal government pension plans to determine if there are changes that we could or should be making at NYSERS and to our other pensions to credit federal service to encourage people to leave, who have left federal government to join city service.
Got it. Okay, so thank you for your question. I'll just take the last part. As it relates to NYSERS and federal pension plans, I'll leave that to NYSERS. We haven't specifically looked at that issue. I can tell you we've done significant work in our minimum qualification review where we have leaned and equified what I'll say is work experience, and certainly for certain federal jobs, there could be significant work experience that is equal on par to maybe some academic training that would make that person qualified and competitive for that.
I know that's been a priority of yours, and I think that's a great thing that you've come in and tried to say, work experience, lower some of the academic requirements, make sure that people who have real-world experience that can help and contribute to city government are eligible for the positions. That I love, but I'm just specifically on the federal government experience piece. Have we looked at those, at that in particular to understand if we need to make adjustments to make sure that we're incentivizing as much as possible for former federal government workers to join city service?
So I think that the MQR review encompasses that because federal workers have significant work experience in a number of technical areas. What we've also done is we've worked with agencies where if they had former city employees that took opportunity with the federal government, we're working with those agencies. Can this person be reinstated? What is the process to rehire this person back in their agency that now has significantly more talent than when they left because of their experience with the feds? So it's on a case-by-case basis, depending on the title we're talking about and the status of that individual. But we engage with agencies who are trying to bring back former city employees that were federal workers as well.
Anything you'd like to add here? Could you speak to the pension issues at all? Are there ways in which we could or should be modifying our pension policies to better incentivize former federal workers from joining city government?
Yeah, so that question would be best addressed by NYSERS. I wouldn't be able to address that.
Do you know if this is something, have you all been in conversation with NYSERS on this topic as of yet?
We have not.
No.
Okay, is that something that you'd be?
I'm happy to engage with my partners in NYSERS to think it through and talk about it. I think that might be better left to maybe like a state legislative issue because it affects pensions and pension tiers. But happy to do the thought work with them to see if there's a value there.
Well, any of those changes would, in all likelihood, come through a home rule through our committee as well. So we'd be happy to be involved or helpful and supportive in any
I know
conversation.
we have done a lot on just trying to help employees, both at the state level and the city level, understand the way portability of their pensions work, right? So at the state and city level, that is much easier. But happy to get into this, to think through what we can do on the federal side.
Okay. I have more questions that I think are for Deputy Commissioner Porter's world, but I will pause in case Councilmember Brewer would like to jump in.
Thank you very much. One question I have is just commercial space. Not all of it's yours, but how much commercial space, I'm talking storefronts.
Okay.
There's certainly a lot of them around here, the old models, et cetera. How much do you have? How are you going to be renting it, et cetera? Because it does seem vacant. And I get complaints generally about vacancy in terms of commercial space. But then when a city has it, it's even more complicated. So I want to get an update on how much commercial space you have and how much is unrented.
Yeah, so we just recently had an auction of 3 storefronts that went successfully well as we transitioned to an online auction website in order to conduct those auctions. That auction just completed for those 3 sites in Bay Ridge, Brooklyn, and we're in negotiations now with the one who won that. As it relates to the storefronts that I think you're talking about, the former Municipal Credit Union branch, as well as the restaurant, the Corte Cafe that was next to it.
And the one at 280 Broadway, too, yeah.
Well, to the Corte Cafe and former MCU Bank branch, I've had meetings with my real estate team to sort of prep and prepare those storefronts for auction. We're evaluating how we can maybe do things a little bit better from our moving to an online auction platform to make sure that we put ourselves in a position to get the most square footage possible dollar value for those sites as well. I can follow up with you on the Model site. That's a little bit different because it's managed by an outside entity who oversees that building, but we can follow up with you on that. And I know you do see a lot of storefronts as you're walking in and around this sort of municipal sector. We don't have control over all those storefronts.
No, I know,
but where we do, we are making efforts to get those lease auctions up.
Could you get a list to the chair of those that you are trying to lease or those that you are empty, that you are in the process?
Happily, we can send you that.
Okay, because it doesn't add to the streetscape, it adds to challenges. And then, of course, my other question is, this is a 30-year question. I do love the city store, but could it be somewhere more visible? And could it be open on the weekends?
Yes.
This is 30-year story.
No, I hear it. I love the city store as well as I've learn more about it. So we're doing a website refresh that's going to be launching very soon. In addition to that, we've done improvements on our back end to sort of increase our online traffic to City Store. I'm also working with our Executive Deputy Commissioner that oversees the City Store to think about is there ways that we can draw in traffic. Soon we will have a new City Store manager that comes from the retail sector, and looking forward to that person bringing some new and refreshed ideas. To the evaluation of relocating the City Store, we've thought about that. We're not kind of there yet, thinking about where that might go, but happy to engage with you and your team on.
Just take a little portion of the Model space, because then every tourist would purchase on the weekends. You're closed on the weekends.
Yeah. We'll take your
All right, and then you need longer scarves. You only have the square scarf. You need the longer scarf.
Got it. Okay, I'll add that to our
This is 30 years of the same conversation. The other question I have is just about food. You know it so well.
Yes.
So my question is, you purchase for Rikers, you purchase for HRA, and you purchase for DFTA. And my question is, what are you doing, Carmine knows this, what are you doing to have more local purchasing? What's the dollar figure, et cetera?
So I'll share with you that we have partnered with organizations, including the New York State Department of Agriculture, Cornell Cooperative Extension, and Grown NYC, to locate and promote locally grown and produced products. Furthermore, we are collaborating with agencies to enhance menu planning and incorporate more New York State products, which is something I know is important to you, Council Member. Whenever possible, DCAS does Food Biz require the inclusion of New York State products based on the successful procurement of these items. In previous contracts, for example, apples and onions are mandated as New York State products due to their consistent availability in past procurements. Local sourcing mandates apply to several categories, including processed fresh and frozen fruits, halal and kosher meals, fresh fruits and vegetables, meats, and poultry, as well as baking products.
Okay, so what you're saying is that you're making big efforts to try to do more. I think
Absolutely.
That's what you're saying.
Absolutely.
All right, so we can have.
We've talked about food before, and
I know, I've been talking the same thing,
Yeah.
me, forever, but I appreciate that you're aware of the concern, and then we can keep working on it.
Yep.
And then just finally, I know that the question of the closure of all of the H&H sites, those were your processes, right, in terms of the places where migrants were living. Are they completely done? Do you still have other places that need to be closed that are under your purview, or is that not your purview at all now?
Yeah, so the operations and decommissioning of past or present migrant sites is not under we don't control that. So I would refer you to the Office of Asylum Seekers, New York City Emergency Management, where they have a footprint in H&H.
Okay, because you didn't have the Randall's Island, Creedmoor, or Floyd Bennett. None of those were yours?
Oh,
Well, we didn't operate them.
Okay.
We did
but the funding-wise,
the funding, yeah.
you
yeah,
were
but I think
responsible for the
councilmember-
contracts.
Yeah, but I think the councilmember's question was about the operations of those.
Yeah, no, I think I misspoke. I do want to know about the funding of. So they're all closed, they're all gone, et cetera. Is that correct?
I'll let DC Middleton give you some further clarification.
Yes, thank you, council member. In terms of the sites that are closed, so Floyd Bennett closed in January. Randall's also closed.
Right.
Our budget in fiscal year 26 does reflect funding for the remaining open sites that we pay the bills for, and that's mainly for Creedmoor and the licensed sites, the Row Hotel
The hotel.
and Bruckner.
And Bruckner.
Bruckner, yeah.
Okay.
That's the new site in the Bronx.
Right, no, I know, I'm aware of it.
Right.
And, all right, and so do you have the cost? Creedmoor is because people are there, and the new site, people are there.
Correct.
So all the ones that are vacant, you're no longer paying for.
Right, we're closing out remaining bills, but there's no budget in fiscal year 26 for those
All right.
sites.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much for raising that, Councilmember Brewer. A few more hiring questions. I was concerned by some of the trends we saw in the PMMR in terms of citywide hiring. We saw a 4% reduction in the number of black new hires, a 3% reduction in the number of Asian new hires, and the percentage of women who were new hires dropped just to 41%. At a time when the federal government is rolling back efforts to increase diversity, or even to mention the word diversity, and threatening DEI practices all across the nation, this should be a top priority for New York City. What do you attribute to these changes, and what's DCAS doing to increase diversity in new hires?
Yeah. So I'll take the one on the gender. So we've given our big exams in our uniform agencies, those tend to trend more towards males. So that's
fair.
where you could have seen that
makes sense.
disparity there. We do have a workforce that is significantly diverse. It's well over 70%. But I think, like we've talked about hiring halls, we're engaging with MWBE contractors. That's not specifically a hiring question, but sometimes workers that we're engaging with that work for MWBEs choose to may want to take a career in the city as they learn more about our city's work. So I think our diversity and inclusion efforts are still in the forefront and our forefront of our mind when we're thinking about bringing in all of the talent that the city has to offer, and that our government workforce is reflective of the city.
Anything you'd like to add?
No.
And you mentioned, Deputy Commissioner Porter, I believe, in our fall hearing that you anticipated the city workforce profile report, one of our favorite reports, for FY24 would be released in March. Are we still on time for that?
So we are a little behind schedule, but not too far.
Okay.
Our new deadline for release is the end of April. We are experiencing some challenges with the data, but we're hopeful to get it done by then.
Okay. The PMMR showed there was a 47% reduction in the number of city employees completing the mandatory equity and inclusion training. I understand this can be dependent on calendar year training cycles, but how many employees are we on track to train in total for FY25?
So we always want to reach 100%. So we're constantly engaging the agencies in completing the mandatory trainings. As you know, we recently launched our NY City Learn system, which,
Do you put agencies on blast? Like, do you share that information publicly of what agencies have, what percentage of employees at a given agency have completed necessary trainings?
I'm not sure if it's public information, but we do provide updates on a monthly basis.
Could you
to
share that
agency
with the
heads.
council?
Sure.
Okay, we'll follow up for that. That's helpful. And then, relatedly, I'm just, given the high-profile documented sexual harassment incidents in this administration, has DCAS taken any steps to review sexual harassment training protocols?
So we're constantly reviewing our training to ensure that it, complies with, federal, state, city laws. And I believe we are engaging a vendor to also take a look at that.
Okay. And there was also a 46% reduction in the number of trainings completed by city employees for professional development. I understand there was a pause in training as you shifted to the NY City Learn platform. I think you were just mentioning. Have trainings resumed?
Yes.
And, okay. And then I lastly just want to ask about DCAS headcount, which I don't think is your problem. But, so shifting back over here. DCAS currently has a headcount, according to our notes, of 2,043 out of a budgeted 2,417 positions, vacancy rate of 15%. But when you factor in the additional 130 positions that Mayor Adams has cut from the DCAS headcount since taking office, it's actually more like 20%. The number of people employed at DCAS has increased by only 20 positions since we had our last budget hearings. What steps are you taking, Commissioner and team, to fill these vacant positions? And could you just advise what positions are currently subject to the 2-for-1 hiring restrictions at DCAS?
Yeah, so, one of our positions, our custodial positions, were subject to the 2-for-1. We're in communication with OMB now to do a 1-for-1 because we want to make sure that we stay on top of our buildings, cleanliness, conditions, and all of those things. So we're engaging with OMB now on those talks.
What positions are exempted? I mean, you mentioned that they are subject to the 2-for-1. Do you have any positions that are not subject to the 2-for-1?
We can follow up with you and get you a list of which ones.
It's not the entire agency?
Not the entire agency, no.
Okay.
In addition to that, our 15% vacancy rate has been steady. I mean, it was also that last fiscal year. I will say that the team overall that I inherited has been doing phenomenal work. So there wasn't need to bring a lot of change to the agency, and our core mission sort of stays on lockstep, and we haven't missed a beat. With that, we've been aggressive with engaging in a lot of areas, not only in competition with trade jobs, jobs in energy, where we're trying to recruit individuals to our agencies, and when we have somebody that we are especially selected and wanting to hire, we make sure we get that person through the process.
I will just say that DCAS is the back end of city government, and when you all don't have capacity, it undermines every city agency's ability to do their job effectively. And so when we're looking at 400 plus vacant positions, a 15% vacancy rate, it really does affect city services much more broadly. And so I wish that with OMB support, there was a plan to actually fill all of these vacant jobs. I'm happy to hear you're addressing cleanliness because the data from the PMMR was really troubling that we saw down only 59% of buildings, down from 72% in the prior year, were deemed clean based on the PMMR's status. So I'm hopeful that OMB...
I'll just, to that specific point, that jumped at me out as well when I first became commissioner. And again, we've addressed bringing on more custodians to do that work, doing better at pest management. I think it's important to point out our buildings are on average about 90 years old. So I think that also has an impact. And we have a new deputy commissioner that's overseeing facilities and construction and technical services. And we're doing better at engaging with our tenants, our agency tenants, to make sure that we're responding to whatever needs that they bring to our attention.
Okay. I have a few questions on city-managed buildings. I'll start with a topic that's a favorite for many in the council, which is scaffolding. Mayor Adams, has made it a whole big thing about how big a priority it is to get scaffolding down, declaring it bad public policy, bad for public safety, et cetera. Yet, of course, the city is responsible for many, many buildings that have had scaffolding up for many, many years on end. What is DCAS doing to get scaffolding down from city-owned buildings? How many city-owned buildings have had scaffolding up for more than 5 years? How many city-owned buildings have had scaffolding up for more than 10 years? Does DCAS have a plan to eliminate all, buildings that have had scaffolding up for over, 12 months.
So let me talk about the city buildings that DCAS manages. I'm happy to share that we have removed scaffolding from 8 sites.
Okay.
One of those 8 sites, we not only removed the scaffolding, but we put up netting, because as 8811, that's Upton Boulevard, we did netting, and that was just better for the cosmetics of the neighborhood in Queens. We have 11 buildings up that still have scaffolding, and we are working, 4 of those 11, we're actively working on those sites with an effort to bring that scaffolding down. We can send you a list of those 11. If
So
you'd
there are
like,
only 11 city-managed buildings that have scaffolding up to
that
them?
are managed by DCAS that have scaffolding. So there may be other city buildings that are managed by other agencies directly and not DCAS that possibly could have scaffolding up.
Okay. I have, celebrated the fact that 360 Adams Courthouse and Kings County Courthouse is finally going to begin work later this summer, I believe, for scaffolding to begin to come down. There's been scaffolding up there for over 18 years. So there are kids graduating from high school this year that are younger than the scaffolding at this courthouse, which is in Columbus Park. Some people here today shop at the farmer's market there and are frustrated by the blight that we have on that courthouse. Can you commit that the timeline for when that work is going to begin and that DCAS is going to be removing the scaffolding in sections as the facade and roof work
I believe that
advances?
work is primarily done by DDC.
Yes.
It's done by DDC, so we'll confer with DDC to make sure they're on schedule.
Okay, great. And then just another parochial question. Any update on construction at the Brooklyn Municipal Building, current completion date, and if you can share if temporary HVAC systems will be used this summer, and is there an is the new boiler in place for next winter?
Yeah, so I'll have Joe Wagner come up. He's technically knows what's going on at that site.
Good to see you, Joe.
Yes, nice to see you again. At 210, we will be not using temporary. Hopefully, we're not using unless temporary. Hopefully, we're not using temporary. Hopefully, we're not using unless scheduled to be completed with the installation, so temporary boilers and chillers shouldn't be used.
So that we should not expect to see temporary
Chillers at all.
chillers or boilers.
Well, right now, the boilers are being used, but they'll be off for the season.
Yeah, but we're
It's
almost,
about done. We're just about done with them.
well, that will be very good news for the people who live nearby. And I will just say, while we've had some very, very angry neighbors, you and your team, Deputy Commissioner Ringelheim, Brandon, have been very responsive, and we've appreciated the communication and the coordination, even though it's been a painful process, that you all have tried to work with us and did eventually identify very good solutions. And the timeline for completion?
The end of December of 2026.
End of December 2026, and Housing Court will move in after that?
The courts will move in after that. We'll be done with construction. The courts
I think the original plan was that Housing Court was supposed to move in 2020, but that's probably not your problem. But we're 2027, we're getting there. And this one might be for you also. The one critical component of the borough-based jail project is that the Brooklyn Criminal Court needs to be made ADA accessible so that the Sally Port so detainees have access from the courthouse to the jail. My understanding is that there's $384,000 allocated for FY29. Is that right? And is that accurate? Or is that?
No, that's not I don't know, that number is just probably a holding. That number, DDC is doing that project. It's not a DCAS project.
So so my anxiety here is that the jail is supposed to be completed in FY29, 2 years after the law requires, but still it's slated to be completed in 29. But if the project is only, the capital work is only going to begin for ADA accessibility in FY29, we're not going to have that done in time for the jail to open. Is there anything we can do to work together to try to speed up that timeline?
What I can do is we can engage with DDC because they're the lead on that project and just kind of see where they are in their planning.
Okay.
Yeah, follow up with you.
Oh, and we have a group of kiddos with us up in the balcony. The Lower Manhattan Community Middle School from Councilmember Marte's district are here, and we just want to thank you so much for being with us today for our preliminary budget hearing with DCAS. We hope you enjoy your time at the City Council. And I failed to acknowledge Councilmember Schulman. Thank you for being here, Lynn. Now I am going to shift to the world of Deputy Commissioner Kerman and the fleet. Thank you very much, Assistant Commissioner Wagner. The PMMR showed that the city was up to 5,349 electric vehicles in the city fleet, an increase of 161 vehicles over the first 4 months of the previous fiscal year. Just about half as many new electric vehicles as were added in the first 4 months of '24, if I have that right. When can we expect to meet the revised goal of 6,000 electric vehicles?
Hi, council member. It's
Nice to
great
see you.
be here again with you. So we are going to be at 6,000 by the end of the year.
Okay.
So we have a lot of purchases that are actually coming in the fiscal year 25 expense budget that are getting delivered now.
Great.
We've also moved some of our purchases, including some of the pickups and vans, are now capitally eligible. So that will take some relief off the expense budget, which we know is always stressed. And we'll expect to see those mid-year. So we're going to hit 6,000 by the end of the year, and a little
The end of the calendar year? Or
At the end of the calendar year.
Okay.
And for a little historical memory, when we started in 2015, when we announced the NYC Green Fleet Plan, we expected to be at 2,000 by the end of 2025 calendar year. So we have moved this, much more than we ever thought we could.
And just walk me through, the goal is to have a fully electric fleet by 2038.
That is correct.
How many new electric vehicles will we need to get there?
Well, basic math, so you have about 25,000 on-road vehicles, right? So you would have to be doing about 2,500 a year to meet that. A little less hard. The 2035 goal is for light and medium, and then there's a 2038 goal for heavy and specialized. So 25,000 on-road, divide by 13 years, you're probably about 2,000.
So 25,000, and we've done 6,000 already?
We've done 6,000.
So we have 19 to go.
Correct, although to be honest,
We'd like to shrink the fleet a little more?
well, we always look for fleet reduction. You also have some electric vehicles that have to be replaced, right?
Sure.
So you have electric vehicles that are 12, 13 years old.
But
Those are not
separate and
gonna be
apart from
20.
replacement, I just mean to say, we have a gap of 19,000 electric vehicles that we need roughly, and we've got 13 years to do it, so we've got to do
But
15.
within that math, it would be what, about 900 a year, if I'm thinking
No,
through the math?
19,000 vehicles, 13 years. That means we've got 1,500 or so to do a
Okay,
year.
better.
Right? Or give or
Trying-
take.
Sure. You have limitations in the marketplace. So, we need to see advances on electric vehicles, say, and plowing, right? We don't have plow vehicles now that are electric. So, that will be a limitation. We're going to need to see advances in firefighting equipment, real advances. So there also are issues in the marketplace. Not everything is ready to be electric yet.
Fair. But that being said, we'd still, how many, just to to help keep it simple for everybody, last fiscal year, how many electric vehicles did we purchase?
About 400
Right.
electric vehicles.
So our very back of the envelope, we're just sitting at a hearing talking math. We've got to do about 1,500 a year. Last year we did 400, recognizing there's some gaps in the market that hopefully it's going to increase over time as electric vehicles become more widely adopted and utilized. We've got a ways to go. Last year there was a $15 million peg, if I recall correctly, to electric vehicle purchasing. Is that right?
That's correct.
How many additional electric vehicles would we have purchased if that $15 million peg had not taken effect?
Well, $25 million, simple math, $25 million bought you 600 electric vehicles on the expense budget. $10 million buys you about 250. So that's the gap. It's about 350 a year that you lose. We are trying to move, like I mentioned earlier, we're trying to move the pickups and vans,
Right.
which we've made a lot of progress on.
But before we get into that,
the capital side.
I do, and I want to get into that. I just, before we do, to keep it simple for me, and because, Councilman, I'm limited. We need to do about 1,500 a year. We did 400. We would have been able to do an extra 350, but OMB cut $15 million, which was 60% of your EV purchasing last year. So we would have been halfway to our goal, but now we're about a quarter of the way to our goal. And that means we're nowhere close to being on pace to achieving the 2038 mandate. We're way off, right? I mean, even if they hadn't cut the $15 million last year from your EV purchasing, we were halfway to our goal. Now we're a quarter of the way to our goal, and you're doing the best you can. And I'm glad you're meeting 6,000 this year, but 6,000 out of a 25,000 goal, we're just way far off. So I continue to be just totally confused at why this cut took effect and how it aligns with our climate goals as a city and for what we're looking to accomplish with the fleet, what we're legally mandated to accomplish with the fleet.
Well, let's go to the greenhouse gas emissions, because that's actually a really great story. We committed to 50 by 25 back in 2015, which goes beyond the legal mandate of 40 by 25. And we are achieving that. So how are we achieving that? You know, we all want more electric vehicles, but we do in fact operate the largest electric vehicle fleet in this state at 5,400 going to 6,000. We operate the largest electric charging network in the state at 2,200 ports, going up to 2,500 and more. We're installing every day. And as the commissioner testified, we've switched out the first major fleet in the East Coast of the United States. All our diesel fuel is now renewable, non-fossil diesel fuel. We basically have used cooking oil and waste animal fat powering the entire city fleet today, as well as the efficiencies, the fleet reduction, and other efficiencies that I know you've been involved with. So the good news on the broader climate agenda is we're meeting 50 by 25. Find me another fleet anywhere that can say that, and we've made enormous progress. On the electrification side, we are still making a lot of progress. We're moving vehicles onto the capital side. We announced a big truck purchase in December. We won a grant, and that is moving forward to get 55 electric trucks. We're going to be doing more electric trucks on the regular capital program. We're also, to really bridge the target, so I know your math, but I'll tell you, actually, really to bridge the target, we need to get law enforcement vehicles into electric models. That's actually what will bridge.
Let's shift gears.
We are working to do that.
So my notes are that the average cost of an NYPD vehicle are $53,938. Is that consistent with your understanding?
I wasn't prepared to answer that question, but it sounds right.
Ballpark-ish.
We could certainly find that.
Would that include outfitting, or would that just be the vehicle itself?
That sounds like an outfitting cost. There's about $12,000 of outfitting that can go into an NYPD vehicle. You have your lights and sirens here,
right,
and the
so
bulletproofing.
Why would, and those lights and sirens, the technology, all of that, totally essential to the vehicle, right? NYPD can't operate. You can't put an officer in that vehicle without it. You can help me here, right? I'm getting a none from the commissioner.
We also remember all those vehicles are being bulletproofed and set up with armor. Followed by.
None of us would ever send a police officer out in any other type of vehicle in good conscience. So we're north of the $50,000 number. Why, for gosh sake, is that not capitally eligible?
Well, as we've discussed before, we are working with OMB and the police department on that very proposal. And so we agree, and we appreciate your support, that police cars, not just for NYPD, but for other agencies, law enforcement vehicles are specialized equipment, just like fire engines, just like sanitation equipment, and should be capitally eligible. That would really help our cause. Plus, the electric upfit will also be $10,000 to $15,000. So totally. As you electrify those, we're working now with Ford and others on a plug-in hybrid and all-electric options so that we can get plugs on these cars. So we are absolutely supportive of that and appreciate your assistance.
Councilmember Areola, myself, this is a priority for both of us. We've raised it with the Commissioner's Office and the Police Department. I know that they believe that this is a priority as well. I know this is a priority for DCAS, if I can say that. So, and I've spoken to the Controller and his team. There's a priority for them too. It seems like everybody agrees except for the Budget Office over on Greenwich Street. So if we could all try to work together to get them to see that this is so obviously in the benefit of us achieving our electrification goals and for us to be able to much more smartly manage the fleet, this feels like the most obvious thing in the world, and I would love for us to achieve it this fiscal year. Can we work together on that?
Absolutely.
Wonderful. Everyone around me is saying that I'm taking too much time. So I will try to go faster. Let's shift gears to real estate, even though I had a lot more questions for you, Deputy Commissioner Kerman. It's always good to see you. Can I just ask, I think I see every Deputy Commissioner here except for the Deputy Commissioner for Real Estate. Is Deputy Commissioner Hamilton not available today? Okay, hope he's okay. I'm sorry to hear that. So the MMR showed there was an increase in leases, 2.8 million square feet, up from 2.5 million in FY23. With the announcement of an extension of the DC 37 remote work pilot, and of course, as I've noted, the shrinkage in the city workforce, has the citywide space savings task force finalized its recommendations?
Yeah, so we're close to having a finalized draft that's being reviewed right now, and look forward to releasing that soon.
Okay. In October, you had mentioned that you had expected it by the end of the year, so we certainly look forward to reviewing it. My understanding is that the total number of leases and the total square footage leased by the city has increased in the Adams administration, despite the citywide remote worker pilot and despite the shrinkage in the city government workforce. Can you explain, or can somebody help explain for me, why we would be leasing more spaces and leasing more square footage when the workforce is shrinking and the workforce has shrunk dramatically and more people are working from home?
Yeah, so I think there's a couple of issues, and I'll turn it over to Executive Deputy Commissioner Overton. We had prior leases that were not reflected yet from the prior administration that were added to that. I believe during the asylum crisis that would have added square footage of space that might have been leased or licensed to the city to deal with that issue, where you see those increases. EDC Overton.
That's accurate.
That's it?
Okay. I have a few follow-up questions from our hearing in October. After that hearing, First Deputy Mayor Torres Springer noted that a city hall was conducting a review of policies and procedures across the administration as a whole. I don't think we ever got an outcome there, but it was slated to include DCAS real estate practices. Do you know if that review has concluded or what happened to it?
Well, we did have a review of one lease that we talked about in October, which was 14 Wall Street.
Great.
That review was done by Mayor's Office of Risk Management, and we are awaiting the deliberation of the decision of that review. But we were very cooperative in the process.
Okay. So no update now. I think that our good friend at DFTA testified that it's in the final stages at the aging budget hearing.
I think that's an accurate description of it'll be imminent.
Okay. Okay. A couple other questions here. So there's no broader review that is happening of DCAS leasing practices?
There is. So Executive Deputy Commissioner Overton and her leadership team is looking at asset and property management overall, which is real estate services, facilities management, and construction and technical services. We're in the middle of that process right now. To understand best practices in other municipal jurisdictions.
But that's not a City Hall review. That's a DCAS internal review.
That's what we're doing internally, yes.
Do you know if the City Hall review continues or what happened to the review?
The larger City Hall review, I would refer you to them to find out about that.
Okay. And you currently now report to Deputy Mayor Varlock?
I do, the Deputy Mayor of Administration.
Right.
Yes.
Okay. And I wanted to ask about the tenant representation services contract. At our October hearing, you testified that DCAS was preparing a new RFP for tenant representation services and that we could expect it, quote, really soon, quote, by the end of the year. Yeah. What's the status of the new RFP?
Yeah, well, that was my hope. So one thing is, through our RFP process that we had with 14 Wall Street, I wanted to strengthen other aspects of the tenant RFP. So working with our DCAS Office of General Counsel, we've tightened that up in areas where I thought there might have been some vulnerabilities, and that's under legal review right now.
Is Diana Boutros still the lead representative on the Cushman-Wakefield contract?
She's on the Cushman-Wakefield team, yes.
And she's still the lead on that team?
She's on the team, yes.
Her position has not changed since the hearing?
It has not.
Have you conducted any review of her selection process as the point person at Cushman-Wakefield working for the city? Working with the city?
So we don't select, we select the vendor, but Cushman & Wakefield selects the team that's in place to manage that contract.
In light of the litigation that has noted the involvement of city officials in her selection as the Cushman-Wakefield representative, there's been no review of her role? There has been no review by DCAS of her role in that. Okay. And despite her glaring lack of qualifications, there's been no review, no conversations about whether we would be better served as a city with a more experienced representative in that position?
I've read her bio. I wouldn't be of the opinion that she lacks qualifications, but she's one member of a Cushman & Wakefield team that services the city's contract.
I mean, I'll just say for the record, she had only done retail leasing, never done commercial leasing, and was put in charge of one of the most important commercial leasing contracts in the city of New York, if not the most. And so I stand by my description, glaring lack of qualifications. At the hearing in October, you testified that you were not familiar with the fact that the Chief Diversity Officer for the city had met with JRT Realty and Deputy Commissioner Hamilton multiple times regarding the fact that Diana Boutros and Jesse Hamilton slashed the MWB goals in the contract. Have you spoken to the Chief Diversity Officer since then and worked to rectify that issue?
No, so the issue was that we wanted to make sure that there was equitable representation of diverse contractors or subcontractors in real estate. So the 30% goal was not reduced. What it was that it was a 10% goal for Black-owned businesses, 10% for Hispanic-owned businesses, and 10% for women-owned businesses.
Right.
To get to the 30.
But the existing contract, which has been delayed and delayed and delayed, let me restate that, has been extended and extended and extended and has continued to be extended under your leadership. The one sub that was an MWBE was JRT Realty. When Ms. Boutros became the point person for Cushman Wakefield, she slashed JRT Realty's role on the contract, slashing the MWBE goals on that contract. You're stating that your priority for the new contract is to expand MWBEs, but you said at the hearing a few months ago you were not familiar with the fact that Cushman had been brought into City Hall to meet with the Chief Diversity Officer to address the fact that the MWBE goals had been slashed on the current contract, which continues to be extended. Have you looked at that issue and tried to address it?
I was not at the meeting. What I can say is that I support diversity, and I think it's important that we look at the subsets of those diversities to make sure that Black-owned businesses, Hispanic-owned businesses, and women-owned businesses are well represented.
And to be clear, I agree with you.
Yeah.
I know you weren't at the meeting. It predated your role as commissioner, your time as commissioner, but you were unaware of it you testified to being unaware of it a few months ago. I was just wondering if anything had been done in the intervening time to look into this matter and try and rectify the existing contract where the MWBE had been cut out.
Yeah, so I was appraised on the clarity of that there was no reduction, and instead of a reduction, we were just making sure that we were having goals that were representative of all of the small businesses.
Okay. I think we might be talking past one another a little bit. I have a couple more topics, and then I will let you all enjoy the rest of your afternoon. But before I do, I just want to offer Councilmember Brewer the chance to ask a few more questions.
One in terms of scaffolding. I know 2720 Broadway is, I think it's Volunteers of America, but it's a city-owned building. So at some point, it would be helpful to know, you own the building, somebody else manages it, the scaffolding is up, and the complaints are endless. So that would be, maybe you could get us a list of the buildings that you own that also have scaffolding. You can obviously check that by looking at who owns it and then comparing that with the DOB website, I assume.
Thank you.
2720 is just nonstop complaint, FYI.
Thank you.
City-owned building. Number two, it says here, and maybe we covered this, I was listening earlier, I didn't hear, 1.1 million for city funds for lease costs on DCAS managed buildings have been reduced. It seems like it would be more because there are fewer city employees. So I want to know, how was that funding determined? What locations does it relate to? And I guess it's just for 1 year only. I mention that also because at a community board, borough board meeting yesterday, Community Board 1 in Manhattan is very upset about 100 Gold because they weren't involved at all in the way in which it's going to be used in the future. So, I mean, that would be an example. You have to move all those people out. I guess you're selling the building as opposed to affordable housing. So how are you deciding how much and what kind of leases a fewer number of city employees are using?
Yes, Councilmember, that 1 million adjustment you see was a technical adjustment done by OMB related to a couple of court sites, 141 Livingston and 151 West Broadway. It's not related to the broader space savings program.
Okay, but what is the number of fewer dollars for leased space because there are fewer employees?
I'm sorry, would have to.
The city of New York has fewer people working. You'd think that if you're standing out here, that we'd have fewer leased space, right? Just computing. So is there a reduction in the cost of leased space because there are fewer employees? And then what are we going to do with all those people at 100 Gold?
Yeah, so to your point, I think when we finalize our space saving report, we anticipate that we will see a reduction, not only because there are less employees, but also we have our work from home 2 days a week that's been extended.
Right.
And just the world of work is just changing.
Right.
To your question regarding 100 Gold Street, that is an Economic Development Corporation-led project. So they, I believe, have already released an RFP so that we can create, I believe the goal is like over 1,000 units of housing. A percentage of that obviously would be affordable. And we do have agencies at 100 Gold Street, and we will be working with the agencies to make sure that we relocate them either first in any city space that may be available for their use, so that that's more cost effective. And obviously, if we have to go to a lease space, then we would do that. But we will work with each agency to figure out what their needs are and what would be the best thing for the city. As far as engaging with the community that's affected by the 100 Gold Street project, I believe there has been community engagement, but again, that project is led by EDC.
The community board was quite upset, FYI. So what you're saying is you're doing the space report and you'll give us a number as to how much we're saving in next year?
We would forecast what we think that savings would be with sort of right sizing the space that's needed or space that is just not utilized or underutilized at the different agencies, and working with the agencies to right size their lease square
So
footage.
what's the timing of that?
The report is in the final stages of being done, so hopefully soon you'll have it to share.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chair Brewer. I have one question on behalf of Councilmember Marte, my friend and colleague from Lower Manhattan, about the status of the 88 East Broadway Mall, if there's anything you can share there. It was supposed to be taken over by new owners 2 years ago, and updates have been requested and nothing's been received. My understanding is there were some legal problems with the new group, but trying to understand, the mall is just sitting there decaying after City Hall had rushed to give it to their allies, and now we want to understand what the path forward is.
I just want to be exact because this involves litigation as well. So the matter related specifically to East Broadway Mall is still pending resolution in bankruptcy court. The court has approved a bankruptcy plan for the city to issue a new lease to a new group called Broadway East Group. The city is currently performing its due diligence before executing a new lease, subject to, of course, the bankruptcy court's proceedings and the completion of the due diligence between DCAS anticipates executing the new lease in calendar year 2025.
Okay. So you expect to execute a new lease this year?
That's
is the
our
bottom
goal,
line.
yes.
Okay.
Presumably the bankruptcy court is in support.
And is there somebody that Councilmember Marte's office should be following up with if they're not getting information?
I mean, I know Councilman Marte well, so he can always reach out to me directly, and I can connect him with who he needs to speak with on our
We
side.
will, his staff just walked out of the room, but we will follow up with them to make sure that
But he has my cell number and everything.
we appreciate that, Commissioner. Two more items from me, and my colleagues will kick me if they have anything they want to add before we let you go. Non-public school security guards. Local law, so we just passed a new law to expand eligibility for smaller schools to benefit from these non-public school security guards. I think this is really important, especially for considering the increase in hate crimes that we've been seeing across the city. Local Law 4 of 2025 sets the maximum reimbursement rate for the expanded program at $35 million, which has not yet been added to DCAS's budget. When will the full funding be added for next fiscal year? Do you expect it in exec?
We have requested it. We're in conversations with the OMB. They do typically add it before the new school year, so we're hopeful.
Okay, great. And Have you done your own analysis? Do you expect the full $35 million to be needed, or is it too hard to predict how many of the smaller schools will take advantage of this?
I think it's a little too hard. Yeah, if we look at the original program, it sort of took a couple of years to ramp up, so.
And headcount has been added as a result of our legislation. Have you guys begun the hiring process there?
Yes, we're starting to recruit.
Great. And then the last topic, Commissioner Molina, I think you are uniquely positioned to lead us to a solution on, and that is renewable Rikers. From your past hat to your current hat, I think you are the person that can help us out of the morass that we find ourselves in. DOC has transferred 40 acres of vacant land and the JATC facility to DCAS control in 2021. Does DCAS have full control and utility of that land and site as of today?
My apologies. DCAS has over the 42.5 acres in that one building facility administrative control.
Okay.
We are not in a position to have day-to-day operational control of that site because the operation of the island, as you know, is managed by the Department of Corrections.
Does DOC still occupy 25% of the facility for storage? Is that right?
I don't know the answer to that, but I can
Or do you know
follow
if
up.
DOC is still using the space?
I don't know the answer if they're still using the space. I would refer you to DOC, but we could also follow up with you as well.
There was a DOI report that I imagine you remember well that showed the building had been used as a secret lounge after being condemned in 2015 by DOC, a secret lounge for DOC officers after the building had been condemned in 2015 and contained hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of unused equipment. Do you know if this lounge area has been cleared out?
Well, that predated me. I could tell you what
Predated you at DCAS or predated you?
at DOC.
At DOC.
Yeah, that lounge situation predated me. It was not used in that state when I was commissioner. I would imagine the current DOC commissioner is not allowing that either.
Good. Has DCAS conducted any assessment of the 40 acres of vacant land on Rikers that was transferred into your control, 4 years ago?
Yeah, so there have been a number of DEP, I think, has put in some research on what the possibilities are, could be the future of Rikers Island, as well as others. Sana, I don't know if you want to add anything to that.
The DEP and MOCJ.
And the MOCEJ also has done some studies that they've shared with the commission as well.
And have you received any communication from DOC outlining a timeline for future transfers to DCAS?
I have not.
So, look,
I mean, it is DOC's, I mean, they own
I understand.
that decision.
Eventually, we're obviously way behind the timeline that is required in local law. I think DDC testified, it's been a long week, but DDC testified on Tuesday that they're looking at 2032 on current plans if things move as anticipated for completion of the borough-based jails. So, for our planning purposes, we are 7 years away from, if nothing changes, the closure of Rikers Island. And we have only the most preliminary of plans for how we can maximize the use of this area to achieve our renewable energy goals and get New York City on a path to sustainability. I am really struggling to understand why this administration is not taking that planning process more seriously. There's legislation in the council now to consider a master plan to force the agencies to do more. My recollection is that, there's a task force that just began meeting within the last year. There's little results to show. The report was frankly lacking in specificity. How do we get this to be a top priority of the administration over the course of the remainder of this year? I don't want to lose 9 more months of us sitting on our hands. We need a real master plan that can, do any variety of bold and ambitious things. We heard Commissioner Agarwal testify earlier this week to some of his priority ideas for what we can do on Rikers Island, but we need to start planning and start the environmental review and whatever ULURP changes will be needed and the above and get the resources. It takes 5 to 7 years to do all of those things. And if we just let the time go, we're going to miss an enormous opportunity. So talk to me. Both of these agencies that are the key agencies involved, as well as anyone in city government. How do we not lose the rest of 2025?
Well, I think, I look forward to working with the Rikers Island Commission to come up with their recommendations and any support that we can provide at DCAS and supporting their work in that effort, I think is important as thinking about what is the future of Rikers Island can be. I've been public about this issue, that I think Rikers Island needs to close. And I think we need to evolve other plans in order to get that done. So I'm in agreement with you in a lot of areas of how do we plan for the future, and DCAS will not stand in the way at all.
And
of
who's appointed
supporting
DCAS for this? Who's your point person on this issue?
Sana Barakat, because we think the biggest impact what renewable Rikers could be is really one of climate and sustainability for the city that could change things for a generation.
Do you think it would be helpful for the council to convene a meeting of some of the leading stakeholders in city government, led by Deputy Commissioner Barakat, to start to try and push for a more aggressive timeline to develop solutions here?
Well, I know that Sana chairs those for me as my designee on the commission. If the council felt they wanted a meeting, that would be up to you. Certainly, if we were invited, I'm sure we would attend.
I mean, the message I got from Commissioner Agarwal earlier this week was basically that nothing's happening. Those are not his words. That's my total interpretation of them. But I was chairing the environmental protection hearing, and it was disappointing. And I just feel like we're on a road to nowhere, and we're losing time, and we can't afford it. It's so important. I mean, this is just the hardest thing to find in New York City is space. We have an island where we can achieve some of our most ambitious climate goals, whether it be new wastewater treatment plants, new renewable energy hubs, and so much more. How do we, I really want to hear how we can make this a priority for the rest of 2025.
Sure. Okay. So if you want to do that work together, I'm happy to think through how we can be more action oriented and heading in that direction.
I anticipate we'll have a hearing on this later this year to try to dig into it more in that way, but I'd love to do more work offline to actually move things forward.
Absolutely.
If I may add,
Please.
the RIAC committee meets frequently, and we are in the process of developing recommendations for the renewable Rikers.
Okay. If there is progress that is happening that we're just not aware of, it'd be great to be looped in more. I've heard from enough people in city government that they do not believe that progress is happening at the pace that it should, that I'm concerned. So I appreciate that you're working on it. I'd love for us to fast track it. With that, thank you very much, Commissioner, Deputy Commissioner, and team. Appreciate DCAS for your hard work, and hope you guys have a great rest of your day.
You too.
We will start with oath now. All right, we will encourage folks to take their seats and to quiet down and all those nice things so that we can get the next thing going. Okay, great. I would now like to welcome Asim Rehman, Commissioner and Chief Administrative Law Judge, to testify before the committee. Thank you for being here today. The Office of Administrative Trials and Hearings Fiscal 26 preliminary budget totals $77.2 million, including $60.5 million in personnel services funding to support 455 full-time positions and $16.7 million for other than personnel services expenses. Oath is the city's central independent administrative law court conducting hearings for city agencies, commissions, and boards. In the preliminary plan, Oath's fiscal 2026 preliminary budget is $3.8 million, greater than its fiscal 25 adopted budget. Today, we look forward to discussing Oath's operations and other adjustments included in the preliminary plan, staffing at the agency, the handling of summons for city agencies, and the status of special education hearings. I remain deeply concerned about the dramatic increase in summons being issued by city agencies and processed by Oath, which are on track to exceed 1 million summons this year. As the agency ultimately responsible for all hearings and decisions, as the clearinghouse of all of these summons, it's critical that Oath helps us better understand the dramatic impact of this increase on working-class New Yorkers. I continue to be concerned that this increase is disproportionately impacting low-income Black and brown New Yorkers who could be forced to make the choice between paying a summons and buying groceries, leading to increased financial strain for far too many families. I greatly appreciate the work of the Oath staff who process all these cases and work to advise New Yorkers on the process. I was particularly impressed by that the number of help sessions more than doubled in the first 4 months of this fiscal year, and I'd like to especially thank John Castelli and Rachel Lamar for their tireless work in conducting in-district Oath help events across the city, including just yesterday in Greenpoint. Thank you to Judge Raymond for joining us today. I know you're under the weather, so we'll try to be nice to you. Well, I can't speak for my colleagues. With that, I'd like to please ask the committee counsel to administer the oath and swear in the testifying representatives.
Good afternoon, officially. Would you please raise your right hands? Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth in your testimony before this committee and respond honestly to council member questions? Thank you. You can go ahead.
Good afternoon. My name is Asim Rahman, and I'm the Chief Administrative
Just
Law
before you begin, I'm sorry, Judge.
Of course, sir.
We're just on a long timeline for today. I just ask if you could highlight the key things and try and limit. There's 7 single-space pages. Will just be a little much. So if you could just streamline a little bit of your testimony today, we would appreciate it.
Yes, Council Member. I've prepared a shorter version than what's been submitted for the record.
Perfect. That's perfect. Thank you very much.
Again, my name is Asim Rahman. I'm the Chief Administrative Law Judge and Commissioner at Oath, the New York City Office of Administrative Trials and Hearings. I'd like to start today by thanking Chair Ressler and the members of the Committee on Governmental Operations, State and Federal Legislation for the opportunity to testify today. As I mentioned, in the interest of time, I'll submit my full testimony for the written record, but I'll present a shorter version of it right now for the purposes of today's hearing. As the Chair mentioned, Oath is the city's independent central administrative law tribunal. In the past calendar year, fiscal challenges have not deterred us from our mission to ensure due process, fair and impartial hearings, and timely decisions for everyone who comes before Oath. All of Oath's adjudicators approach this responsibility with the utmost seriousness, as do the Oath staff who help support our hearings. I can personally speak to this commitment. As the Chief Administrative Law Judge, I myself conduct trials and conferences where I meet with litigants and their representatives, listen to evidence, help parties find opportunities to settle, and issue decisions that are based on the law. Even when faced with challenges, Oath's been able to maintain our standards by adapting our practices so that we continue to seamlessly deliver our services to New Yorkers, city agencies, and all parties who appear before us. The proof is in the numbers. In the calendar year 2024 alone, we processed almost 660,000 summonses. We held close to 250,000 hearings. We issued over 2,500 appeals decisions, conducted over 670 trials, and closed over 17,000 special education cases. It's a notable increase from the volume of work we did in calendar year 2023. These tremendous figures are a testament to the amazing public servants who are part of the Oath team. In each of these thousands of cases, the tireless and committed staff at Oath take great care to ensure that every party who appears before us is treated impartially and is accorded due process. Oath has 3 main adjudicative divisions: the Trials Division, the Hearings Division, and the Special Education Hearings Division. Oath has a robust help center that provides non-legal support to unrepresented parties with cases at Oath. Oath is also home to the city's Center for Creative Conflict Resolution and to the Administrative Judicial Institute. Oath's work is also supported by a variety of internal teams, including our Administration Division, General Counsel team, IT Division, Legislative and Public Affairs teams, and more. A key and core ingredient to ensuring due process is keeping oath impartial and independent. For oath, impartiality and independence means that our administrative law judges and our hearing officers listen to all sides, review the evidence without favor, apply the law fairly, and do this without any external influence. We do not take direction from any city agencies on our cases. At Oath, we believe there's one standard of justice for all. The members of the public who have cases at Oath are treated no differently from the city agencies that appear before us. Independence and impartiality also means that Oath does not comment on enforcement policies, rules, or regulations, or on disciplinary practices of the agencies that file cases with us. Our role is to adjudicate cases, not to set policy. Consistent with this, when we regularly provide City Council with data reports concerning cases filed with Oath, you'll note that we do not analyze that data or make recommendations. Such analysis is not in our purview. As for our budget, Oath's fiscal year 2025 adopted budget was $73.4 million, and the fiscal year 2025 current modified budget was $74.6 million. Oath's total preliminary fiscal budget for fiscal year 2026 will be $77.2 million. Of that, $60.5 million is in personnel services and $16.7 million is in other than personnel services. Agency headcount will be 455 for fiscal year 2026 preliminary budget, and that doesn't include the 363 per session judicial hearing officers in the hearings division, all of whom work on a part-time schedule. Whatever challenges await the city, Oath's amazing staff have dedicated themselves to meeting the moment and making sure that New Yorkers receive impartial hearings and timely decisions. Oath staff is very much New York's fairest. As noted, I'm going to submit a more detailed version of the testimony into the record, but for now, I look forward to our continued efforts with the City Council, and I welcome any questions you may have. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councilmember Brewer, if you would like to ask questions anytime, please just let us know. Let's start with the head count. Why is Oath's actual head count as of January 25 over the budgeted head count by, I believe, 16 positions?
So our head count with the under the fiscal 2026 upcoming budget will about break even. Currently, we're just one over that amount. And the reason that we're over the amount is because our needs have grown. And when our needs have grown and when we've needed additional resources to adjudicate cases, we've gone to OMB, we presented them with the evidence, and they've approved our request to have additional staff. And they have allowed us to hire additional staff, but have not yet put those funds into the budget. They've said they will put those into future plans. So that's why we have more staff than are actually budgeted for.
So Oath's budget has increased 30% since the FY25 preliminary budget. Last year, Oath's budget increased 23%, $14 million from when we had our hearing to the adopted budget. So a 23% increase from prelim to adoption, $14 million. That's a big increase for a small agency, including $4.2 million in new baseline needs for 23 new positions. You had testified during our preliminary budget hearing that Oath has the resources it needs. So a little confused at how we got there, but that being said, are you intending to ask for additional needs again this year, and will you share with this committee what those intentions are?
Well, I can answer it in a word, and that word is cannabis.
Is what?
Is cannabis.
Cannabis.
A key change since when we last sat here, council member, was the legal change that allowed the sheriff of New York City to enforce the state cannabis law. And anyone who, of course, is subject to a fine or a penalty is entitled to due process, and those cases came before Oath. So we had a new form of case come to us in the last year, and not just a new form, but a case that was subject to expedited handling. So we needed additional resources. That included additional adjudicators, both part-time and full-time, and that included other administrative staff. So those are just some of the changes over the last year where we've gone to OMB and said, there's a new need, we need additional funding, and we received that additional funding. There was a second part to your question that I don't recall, council member.
Do you have new needs for this year?
We do, and we've submitted those to OMB, and we are in active discussions with them about those needs and the details behind them.
Anything you can share with us?
There are needs related across the department. They are both needs that concern what the public sees, the adjudicators, but there are also needs that concern our internal infrastructure.
So both staffing and OTPS?
Correct.
Okay. I'd like to shift to summons. The PMMR showed that summons were up another 35% in FY25 and on track to exceed 1 million summons issued for the year. This is more than double the number of summons issued when Mayor Adams took office in FY22. As I mentioned in my opening, I am deeply concerned about the impact these summons are having on New Yorkers and the lack of impact they're having to actually address and improve city conditions. Recent reporting showed that the Department of Health doubled the number of rodent summons, but 311 activity about rat complaints continues to increase. NYPD has just announced a new quality of life unit that will inevitably drive summons up even further, and my understanding is the NYPD is throwing the progress of the CJRA from the Mark Viverito de Blasio era out the window. I understand that Oath is not responsible for issuing these summons, just adjudicating. But you are the clearinghouse and the only agency that has insight into the cumulative impact that these million summons in FY25 have on New Yorkers. Have you done an analysis of the dramatic increase of the summons issued by the Adams administration and spoken to City Hall about it?
Yeah. I'm not sure I would characterize Oath as the place that would have insight into the impact of those increases. We do see the increases, and again, our job is to adjudicate the cases. So we are in a position to provide whoever wants to conduct that data analysis, be it City Council, be it City Hall, individuals who want to look at data to see what increases have gone up and what does that data tell us. We can provide that data. Oath sits on a tremendous amount of information regarding our summonses. And we issue many reports, including regular reports to council.
Have you flagged for your counterparts at City Hall the tremendous increase, a doubling since the time the mayor took office, so that they're thinking about the impacts of such a phenomenal increase in summons during this relatively short period?
It would be appropriate for Oath to flag for City Hall the impact it would have on Oath and our obligation to make sure we can provide timely hearings. It wouldn't be appropriate for the tribunal to flag for City Hall any larger societal impacts of those summonses.
But you do look at whether you think agencies are appropriately following their own rules and regulations and laws in the issuance of those summons.
In the issuance of those summonses. But if we were to see a trend that this particular agency sees this type of dismissals or whatnot, that would be for the agency to study to see, do they need to be doing anything differently? It wouldn't be appropriate for the court to say, hey, agency, we see XYZ thing happening, because then we lose our status as being an impartial party.
Certainly, I understand you're an impartial party, but flagging the trend lines, both for the impact for Oath, but also the impact on New York City, seems like a notable thing to do. It sounds like you have not had that conversation with counterparts at City Hall about 1 million summons that we're on track for 1 million. Do you know the average cost of a summons in New York City?
I don't, but
any of your colleagues?
It ranges. I can tell you that the lion's share, vast majority of summonses that we see are issued by the sanitation department. And the categories of summonses that we see most frequently are the types of summonses that have what we may consider to be lower level penalties. But I don't know how the numbers shake out if we were to do a pure across the board average. But again, council member, I think it's really important to point out that while you and others may think that there is great value in analyzing that increase, that is not an analysis that the tribunal should engage in.
I appreciate that sanitation is one agency that's seen a significant increase in summons, but when the last time I looked through all of this data, a broad range of agencies had shifted policies in this administration and were dramatically increasing the number of summons issued. Going from 500,000 to 1 million in 3 years, and that means that 1 out of 8 New Yorkers has an additional $75 that they owe to the city every single year, or whatever that average number is. That is a big financial impact on New Yorkers, and it's not clear to me that it's improving the quality of life in any way. And so I get that you're just here to you know, as Justice Roberts might say, judge the balls and the strikes, or call the balls and the strikes, but nobody is looking at the policy implications of encouraging every single agency to just issue as many summons as they possibly can and what that does to New York City. So I wish that this was a place where you would take the data that you're seeing and highlight for your counterparts at City Hall that we have a problem and that, you know, we can't just summons our way out of the issues that we're facing in New York City. Councilman Brewer, you want to jump in?
Two things. First of all, I'll say hello to your parents. That was great for me to meet them at that event. I want to talk about cannabis. I'm obviously interested in this topic. So, two things. Are you getting payments from those that have been closed? Because I know that was a concern. And then also, I think there's ongoing litigation that includes questions about the unit's training and knowledge needed to preside over the cases. So I didn't know if you were doing anything different in order to deal with that issue. And number two is pedicabs. Why do some violations go to oath and others to the Midtown Court? I'm a big fan of Judge Wang at the Midtown Court, and he doesn't know why there's a difference also. And also, do you have any recommendations on how to deal with these pedicab issues?
Thank you, and thank you for the kind words, Councilmember Brewer, and we always appreciate your engagement with Oath and coming out to your district where we can work with your constituents on matters they may have. As to your questions regarding cannabis, Oath is the system of record with respect to payments made when a summons penalty is imposed. So if a hearing happens or there's a default and a penalty is imposed, we're the system of record that has the data both on what's been imposed, what's been paid, and what hasn't been paid. Right. We're not in the business of going out and collecting on those.
That's finance.
Right, and so we do have information and data on how much has been paid and how much hasn't been paid on that summons, on that those summons codes. Okay. As for training, if there's active litigation of which we know that there are some challenges regarding decisions that have come out of Oath, that's not something I can comment on, and that would be more appropriate for the law department. I'm not aware, and I'm happy to follow up, I'm not aware of particular real kind of substantive allegations that have been made regarding the training and competence of our hearing officers. But I can tell you anecdotally that I read the decisions that come out from our various hearing officers, and I've looked closely at the ones that are being issued regarding the cannabis cases. I don't overrule them. They are independent hearing officers, but I find the quality of them to be very good, thorough, engaging with the evidence, explaining the law. So I feel very confident in the capabilities of our hearing officers for these cases.
Okay.
On the question of pedicabs, I'm not sure. Can we get back to you on that? I don't know, sitting here today, what are the violations that are being issued against pedicab drivers and how that might differ from I'm sorry, it was which court?
Mayor's Midtown Court.
Midtown
it's on
Court.
54th Street, yep. Judge Wang.
All right, we will look into that and we'll see if we can get back to your office with some information about what is the difference between what type of violations come to Oath versus the Midtown Court. That's a new one for me. Thank you.
Okay. And then in terms of special education, that's something that I know you're dealing with more recently, and it's a big challenge in terms of the students and the families and so on. So on the Special Education Hearings Division, which now handles all due process cases for students with IEPs, and individualized special education programs. How is this hearings division structured? I think the reason we're asking this question, I think you know this, is the Carter cases are just blossoming, and costing. And so we're trying to figure out how they can be not adjudicated for the right position and student placement, but then there's a cost factor too. So I just want to know a little bit more about that division.
Sure. So the Special Education Hearings Division is one of our, as I mentioned, main three adjudicatory divisions, and it is led by a deputy commissioner. It started up right when I got here, so It started in early 2022 by nature of the agreement between the city and the state in late 2021. And it started with just a handful of people, and it has grown significantly because of the need. We now have close to 100 independent hearing officers working full-time on staff. We have 4 special education attorneys who are not hearing officers, but they assist with legal casework. And we have about 19 to 20 administrative staff members. And these are the individuals who are the muscle behind the cases. They are the ones who line everything up and help with scheduling and support all of the independent hearing officers. So that's the structure of the unit, and the way that the process works is if a parent or family files a due process complaint with the DOE then has to assign that out. And before last January of 2024, DOE would assign out those cases, some to Oath and some to contracted IHOs not affiliated with Oath. Starting with January of last year, 2024, now all new cases come to Oath. So if DOE gets a due process complaint, whatever that volume is, they assign it to Oath.
Right.
So we are dealing with that volume on our end.
What's the timing between when the family files and there's adjudication and hopefully?
Yes, that's really the key question, and that timing question is what got Oath involved in the first place.
Right,
I'd like
I'm
to
aware.
remind you
Liz
that
Vladeck is the good person behind all that, yeah.
I understand. Before Oath got involved, average case length was over 250 days before Oath got involved. Now that we're involved, average case length is closer to 84 days, which is below the legal threshold of 105 days. The legal deadline time is 75 days. Usually there's a 30-day extension that people ask for. That's 105 days. So our average is below, but as noted in the PMMR, we still have work to do. About 80+% of our cases are closed within that legal deadline. A tremendous improvement from what the world was like before Oath took these cases. But of course, we want to get that number higher.
And are there new needs that are related to this division? Are there other fundings needed? Is there something, I know you say it would be good to get that, well, 20% or whatever it is, to be in the ballpark, or even less than 84 days. Are there new needs related to this division that you think should be evaluated?
These are things that we are regularly talking with OMB about. They just recently approved Oath posting and hiring 9 additional IHOs, which we quickly filled, and they are just completed training a week or two ago. So as we demonstrate with the numbers to OMB what the need is, OMB has been in active discussions with us, and as I mentioned recently, approving bringing on new people.
More on the policy level, and then I'll stop, which is obviously you're dealing with adjudication, that makes sense, but there may be policy implications. So do you also discuss that with the Board of Education? Because this Carter case is a big mess.
Yeah,
Not your mess, the population, our city, education. Is there like a policy implication that you would also discuss with the with the Department of Education?
We do not. While we do engage with the Department of Education on a number of fronts, mostly logistical and procedural, these broader issues about how to address services for students in New York who have special needs are policy decisions, and it is not the appropriate place for the tribunal to get involved in those discussions.
All right, thank you very much.
Thank you, Council Member.
Thank you very much, Councilmember Brewer. I'd like to continue on the topic of special education hearings. So recognizing there's been some improvements relative to just the disaster of how this issue had been handled at the DOE, in the first 4 months of FY25, Oath closed only 85.6% of cases within the regulatory timeframe, which is down 10% from last year. And the average time to close cases increased 23% from 68 to 84 days. Could you speak to these declines and what measures Oath is taking to more efficiently resolve the cases?
Yeah, so I could say without scientific certainty, but I could say that our main understanding for that decrease in time was because of an increase in caseload.
Increase in time? But yeah.
Right. Meaning,
yeah, no, I got you.
The drop in the compliance. I'm
Yes.
sorry. Was due to an increased caseload. In particular, last summer, because of some movements that were happening at the state level, there was a very sudden surge of a particular type of case that was filed by parents, and we've had to deal with that massive surge. And so the increased caseload has, of course, created new work. How are we dealing with it? Well, we have to very tightly manage internally how we do our case assignments, how we set up our processes, and then there comes the question of resources, which, as I mentioned, has had us go to OMB to say this is how our numbers have changed. This is what we think is the right ratio of cases per hearing officer. We think we need more resources, and we just got we got permission to hire a new IHO.
So the thing that I'm struggling with, and maybe I don't have a comprehensive enough understanding of the issue. But in last week's Education Committee's preliminary budget hearing, DOE spoke to a decrease in filings of due process claims by about 20% during the 24-25 school year, which I would have thought was reflected in these PMMR increases that are discordant with what you just testified to. Can Oath verify this decrease, and do you have any insight into why? And shouldn't that have worked in the opposite direction of what you just spoke to?
I can explain. I can't verify DOE's numbers, but if you were to tell me that DOE had an overall decrease in due process complaints, I can tell you why you don't see the commensurate decrease on the Oath side. So here's the reason. It comes back to what I was explaining with Councilmember Brewer about us starting to take all new cases in January of 2024. So when you compare the two school years, before January 2024, even if DOE had this many cases, they were farming them out to both Oath and the independently contracted IHOs. So we were not seeing that full volume. But come January 2024, we were now getting all the cases. So while the greater pool was shrinking, the gross number of cases going to Oath was actually going up. Does that make sense? Or
I think so.
we were not seeing, if we were for the past several years seeing all of the cases and there were no contracted IHOs, then maybe there'd be more of a parallel trend line. But Oath, looking at our gross numbers, we were not seeing all the cases. So we saw a gross increase from what was X before. I can tell you the fiscal year 2024 Oath caseload total for the first 6 months of the fiscal year was just over 10,000, and fiscal year 25, it was just under 14,000, because we were getting more of these cases.
Okay.
It all goes to how DOE farms them out.
I wanted to follow up on the issue of this June 1st policy that
Yes.
DOE implemented for the first time this past year. My understanding is that for children attending non-public schools, let me restate that. DOE enforced the June 1st deadline for the first time for children that attend non-public schools regarding their applications for continued services. This resulted in thousands of children being left without vital services. Has Oath seen an increase in cases relating to this issue? How many? And is Oath taking into account the fact that the city never, ever previously enforced this deadline?
So this is a question that would come up in the course of a hearing. DOE, the June 1st deadline is in the law. It's up to DOE to raise that in a hearing or not as a legal defense or as a legal claim that this particular due process complaint or this assertion should not move forward because they missed the deadline. It is a legal...
Are they consistently raising it in hearings?
So it is, I'll come to that in a second. When it's raised, it then has to be adjudicated by the hearing officer. The hearing officer is going to look at that claim, they're going to look at the facts of that case, they're going to look at the law, they're going to reach a determination.
Do you give guidance to hearing officers on how to handle this?
Once they are trained, they are independent, they reach the determinations based on the fact and the law in front of them. So as an agency head, I do not give them guidance, not my place to. Our deputy commissioner does not direct them on how to rule these. We trust them to reach the result that they believe is right under the law and the facts. So what it might mean is it could mean...
So that may mean that it's inconsistently applied depending on the hearing officer, if we don't have a consistent approach.
Well, I'll say this. We don't keep data on the details of individual dispositions. We may know the number of cases, but this is a legal ruling within a case. It's not something that we track. I can tell you anecdotally that since this issue emerged, anecdotally we've seen DOE raise it more as a claim in a case than we did before this past summer. So are we seeing it being raised as a claim by one party? Yes, we are. Do I have data on the frequency?
It's troubling because we've never seen the law implemented before. So for many people who have been navigating the very painful bureaucracy of our special education system for years, they didn't know this was a meaningful deadline, and then all of a sudden it was having outsized impact on their lives. And it sounds to me like we think DOE is raising this a bunch of the time, but we don't know exactly how much. and we don't know how different hearing officers are approaching it individually based on the facts of the case, even though it seems like we should be allowing for greater latitude or flexibility since there was no warning provided by the DOE that that they were finally taking this deadline seriously. I just think we're putting families in a horrible position and dramatically impacting their access to the special education services that they need. Is there anything more that you can do in the leadership role of the agency in trying to help rectify this to ensure that families get the services and support that they deserve?
If it's a legal argument that a party is entitled to raise in a hearing, they can raise that, and the other party is in a position to explain why the hearing officer should or should not follow that argument.
Are these families primarily arguing cases without an attorney?
I don't have, one moment. I may have, 1 second, let me check something. As noted in our PMMR, we do have data on special education cases where parents are represented by counsel or other representative. It was, the 4-month actual for fiscal year 2024 was 94.36%. It went down, meaning there's more unrepresented individuals and parties to 72.28%.
72% unrepresented? Or 72% represented?
Represented, meaning it used to be 94.
So a quarter of families do not have representation.
Right. And that's in all cases, not in particular.
Not special education in particular?
No, I'm sorry, those are in all cases.
Special education.
Special education hearing
Right.
commission, yes.
And so quarter of cases don't have representation. Is Oath providing support and assistance for families that are navigating this process?
Yes. Our hearing officers, not only are they trained on this, they have an ethical duty to ensure that individuals in all of our divisions, not just special education hearings division, are given a fair opportunity to present their case.
Do you track outcomes compared to whether there's representation or not for the family?
I don't know the answer to that question.
Could you track that?
That's what I don't know. I don't know if we have cross data, which would allow us to see outcomes versus representation or non-representation. Okay. I don't know that sitting here today.
We will follow up. If you do have that data, we would very much like to understand it. You all have a hard, let me do one more on this and then I'll give my spiel. The MMR showed there were about 3,500 more cases sent to Oath than closed in FY24, and about 6,000 more cases sent to Oath than closed in the first 4 months of 25. I know that when DOE started transitioning cases to Oath, there was a backlog of like 16,000 cases, so it's relative. I mean, as I mentioned, I think this is one of the worst corners of bureaucracy in all of city government. Most dysfunctional. Could you speak to what the current backlog is? How many cases are still open for over 6 months, over a year? How are you tracking that from a kind of global view?
Yeah, so I'm not sure if we're using the same terminology. When we at Oath think of backlog, we are specifically talking about unassigned cases. So case filed with DOE that just hasn't even been given to a hearing officer, that hasn't been, as it's called, assigned.
Okay.
So there was a backlog before Oath got involved. Now there is zero backlog. A case gets to DOE within, I think, a day or two, and I could be wrong, it might be within the same day, it gets assigned out, and then we assign it to a hearing officer. So that means that if the backlog is zero, every case is with a hearing officer. It is just going to take time for those hearing officers to resolve those cases, and that gets us to the question of how we're doing with completing cases within the legal time frame.
Right. So, but we're seeing significantly more cases sent to Oath than closed. So 3,500 in FY24, 6,000 in the first 4 months of FY25. Those are significant discrepancies. How are we understanding the cases that you all have the capacity to close these cases in a reasonable time frame at scale?
I understand. That is part of the strategies we have internally to look at the volume of cases we have, look at our hearing officer and staff capacity, determine how to proceed and assign those cases. So there's an internal management component of it, but then there's a resource component of it. And that involves the discussions we have with OMB when we show that the numbers have gone up, our staffing numbers have not changed much. There's only so many hours in the day. Can we hire more hearing officers? And then, as I mentioned, we recently got approval to bring on additional hearing officers. And if the numbers demand additional resources, we're going to continue to have those discussions with OMB.
Okay. I mean, look, we're seeing the average time to close cases has increased 23%. We realize that it's faster than it was in the old system, but still too slow. So I think we want to work together to understand what those needs are, and certainly with Chair Joseph, try to help advocate to make sure that families are getting the special education support that they deserve. I'll do two more quick questions and then encourage you to enjoy the rest of your Friday afternoon. Thank you for laughing, Gail. I appreciate you always. Mediations and consultations. The MMR showed that oath mediations for city employees increased 62% last year, and mediations for members of the public are up this year, although still only, I think, at 7. Is oath tracking the results of mediations? How can we scale up these programs more effectively?
So, one second, I do want to look at some data real quick. Yeah, the mediations for the members of the public, as you pointed out, are in single digits, so it's hard to kind of really say that the percentage increase. And the mediations for city employees.
No, that was the percentage increase I showed mentioned was for city employees.
Yes. Yeah. And so for city employees, we're happy to provide the services out of the Center for Creative Conflict Resolution. It's a great team of individuals that provides mediations, management training, restorative justice work for all of city government. And at every city agency, they have an ADR coordinator that helps connect with the center to do this type of work. And we are happy, I'm happy as an agency head, that every time they go and do a training, even with staff, central staff at City Council, that they get called to do more. So to your question about how are we tracking it, with our mediations and with our trainings, we issue a post-event survey, a post-mediation survey, a post-training survey. And the survey asks questions to help us improve our services. You know, what went well? Would you recommend this to someone else? Was your problem resolved? So we do have these kind of qualitative surveys that allow us to improve our services. And the overall takeaway from those surveys has been the work is effective and people like it and they want more of it. Which gets us to your question about have we thought about scaling it up? It's a small team of 9 professionals who, of course, leverage the help of the ADR coordinators at every agency, but 9 people, when you compare it to the city's workforce, is not a lot of folks. And there's a tremendous amount of good work to be done out there. And if we can avoid conflicts before they grow by using these alternative services, well, that helps everyone. So I have had some internal conversations about what would it look like for this team to be larger. But those are really all in their infancy stage, and that would be a much larger discussion that would involve City Hall, OMB, City Council maybe even, to see what would the next version of the Center for Creative Conflict Resolution look like.
Well, I think that this council has been supportive of increased efforts to mediate resolutions, and you know, I think if you can share data with us on how you've been successful with city government employees, we should be thinking about how to expand the model and support more people. So, you know, want to just continue that conversation and explore scaling that up together. And then lastly for me is around judicial hearing officers. So judicial hearing officers play a vital role in ensuring oath cases are handled efficiently. Since the pandemic, my understanding is that these officers have been working entirely remotely and are required to provide their own equipment, their own supplies. I know that there are ongoing collective bargaining negotiations on this, so we'll see what you're able to comment. But does Oath provide any supplies or support to Oath hearing officers who are operating remotely?
You're right. There are aspects of this that are governed by collective bargaining. The judicial hearing officers who are a vital part of Oath, they are the ones who are helping us get through those more than 220,000 hearings a day. Today, this Friday, we will likely clear more than 600, maybe more than 700 hearings today because of the work of our judicial hearing officers. So they are an essential team for what we do. Their work conditions are governed by their collective bargaining contract, and that includes whether or not Oath will cover expenses, including covering expenses for training. We will cover the expense for mandatory training. They are paid for that. They are not paid for the equipment that they use. That is their own expense. That's all subject to collective bargaining. We do provide support. Our IT team is available. Our help desk staff will assist them if they are having issues with their software or connecting to a hearing. So, of course, we want to make sure that they are in the best position possible to adjudicate their cases. So we do provide that type of support.
Just from a basic logic, it doesn't make sense to me that we have a full-time remote employee and we don't provide them with the basic equipment that they need to do their job. I understand that some of this has to be resolved in through the collective bargaining process, but just wondering, have you conducted any cost assessment for the relevant supplies that a judicial hearing officer needs to do their job?
So there's a few elements to this. First is the judicial hearing officers, while they are fully remote, they are not full-time. They have an hourly cap of 1,000 hours per year. Many of them, they do different things. Some of them may have their own practice. Some of them may adjudicate in other forums. Some of them may decide that this is all they want to do, but it's only 1,000 hours a year. So we have to take into consideration that as well with respect to how resources are allocated. I recently held a town hall with our hearing officers. Like I said, they are a vital part of the Oath family. So in January, we invited all of them to come to a virtual town hall. Everyone was allowed to submit questions. We received over 24 questions. Some of them covered this issue. Some of them covered the topic of breaks. Some of them covered the topic of, what's the future of the hearings division at Oath. We had about 50 hearing officers attend. I was really happy with the participation. And the feedback I got afterwards was that the town hall was helpful. So we take many steps to engage with our hearing officer family members, but again, there are certain things that are going to be subject to their contracts, just as there are with all of our other employees who are represented by unions.
I'm just not familiar with any other employee in city government that has a full-time, that has a required remote component, and I don't see how it's not the city's obligation to provide the supplies or resources for them to be able to do their job. It just doesn't make sense to me. And so my understanding is this issue has been going on for years. We still don't have a resolution. We've heard from many angry judicial hearing officers. I appreciate you are engaging with them as their manager and giving them a chance to ask questions and engage constructively. It's the role of every commissioner across the city to do that on a consistent basis. But I hope in your capacity as the leader of the agency, you can encourage OLR to be reasonable that these judicial hearing officers deserve some basic support for the supplies they're required to do to provide an essential job in city government. So hopefully we will see this resolved and resolved soon. My basic understanding is that they get lost in a world that there's a million teachers. And so when things get bargained, there are much bigger fish, the biggest fish in the city, right? Sorry, not a million teachers, 100,000 teachers. I expanded our workforce slightly. But we've got 100,000 teachers. It's a lot of people. And how many judicial hearing officers are there?
There's a roster of about 390.
Okay, so we got 100,000 teachers and 300 and something thousand of these guys. They get lost in the sauce, but it's important and they deserve it. And I hope that you can encourage OLR to do the right thing by this important component of your workforce.
Thank you.
With that, thank you very much for joining us today. It was a thoughtful conversation. We appreciate your hard work and the hard work of everybody at Oath.
Thank you to the council for your support and engagement. We appreciate it. Have a good afternoon.
Have a great day. And now we'll hear from the law department. Let me just apologize, Madam Corporation Counsel, for keeping you waiting. And we knew DCAS was going to go long. There's just too much there. But we tried to keep both short so that we could get to the law department. So we appreciate you and your team being with us today. I'd like to welcome our Corp Counsel, Muriel Good-Trufant, and the head of the Law Department to testify before our committee. The Law Department's fiscal year 2026 preliminary budget totals $259 million, including $180.8 million in personnel services funding to support 1,510 full-time positions and $78.2 million for other than personnel services expenses. The Law Department serves as legal counsel for the city, the mayor, various elected officials, and numerous city agencies. In the preliminary plan, the Law Department's fiscal year 2026 preliminary budget is $4.4 million greater than its fiscal year 25 adopted budget. The preliminary plan included additional baseline funding for 25 new positions to litigate and provide legal support related to the new cannabis laws, to address a gap in personnel services funding for existing agency headcount, and for outreach and public events related to the 2024 and 2025 Charter of Vision Commissions appointed by the mayor. Today, we look forward to discussing the Law Department's operations, their new needs, and other adjustments in the preliminary plan, staffing at the department, and the metrics reported in the FY25 PMMR. The Corp Counsel serves as the lawyer not for the mayor, but for the entire city. For decades, that was true more on paper than in reality. But since the Corporation Counsel has become subject to advice and consent, we've seen a meaningful shift. Under your leadership and the leadership of your predecessors, Georgia Pestana and Judge Hines Radix, the Law Department has treated the City Council as a partner in city government and has worked diligently to provide us with confidential guidance and support. This orientation allows us to do our jobs more effectively to the benefit of all New Yorkers, and for that, I truly am grateful. The Law Department continues to operate with 400 fewer personnel than prior to the pandemic, and Mayor Adams has cut 341 positions from the budgeted headcount. I remain concerned about the impact that this reduction in capacity has on Law Department operations. As we face growing legal threats from the federal government, it is critical that we fully staff the Law Department to ensure we are prepared to defend our city. I have a great deal of admiration for the many impressive lawyers I've had the privilege to work with and learn from at the Law Department, including Cheryl, Eric, and others. It is a beautiful thing to see one of the most impressive attorneys at the Law Department work their way up over a 30-year career to become Corporation Counsel. The City Council was proud to enthusiastically confirm your nomination last year. The Law Department has a vast portfolio, and I enjoyed reading the breadth of your work in the 2024 annual report. I also had a new understanding of the divisions after reading that report that I had never really had before, so I appreciated it. I'm grateful to all of the hardworking employees at the Law Department and have particularly appreciated the advice and support from the Law Department on critical projects in District 33, especially of late from Tasha McKnight and Chris Rio. Corporation Counsel, thank you for being with us today. We look forward to your testimony. And with that, I'd like to ask Committee Counsel to administer the oath and swear in the testifying representatives.
Good afternoon. Would you please raise your right hands? Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth in your testimony before this committee and respond honestly to council member questions?
I do.
Thank you. You can begin.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Chair Ressler, Councilmember Brewer, and distinguished members of the Government Operations Committee. It is a pleasure to come before you to discuss the Law Department's fiscal year 2026 preliminary budget. I'm joined by First Assistant Corporation Counsel Cheryl Neufeld, Managing Attorney Eric Eichenholz, and Chief of Administration Jenny Nagel-Indigoing. The Law Department represents the city, the mayor, the City Council, other elected officials, and the city's agencies in all affirmative and defensive civil litigation. As a prosecuting agency, the department brings proceedings in family court alleging violations of criminal laws and represents the people of the state of New York in proceedings filed in criminal court to enforce the city's administrative code. Law Department attorneys draft and review local and state legislation, real estate leases, procurement contracts, and financial instruments for the sale of municipal bonds. The Law Department also provides legal counsel to city officials on a wide range of issues, such as civil rights, education, intellectual property, land use, and environmental policy. The department's work embraces all city entities and operations. Our impact is tremendous. The department currently has approximately 770 assistant corporation counsels, 685 legal support professionals. We are proud to be a leader in the legal profession, with approximately 29% of our lawyers being ethnically diverse and 57% women. The Law Department plays an important role in enhancing the city's fiscal strength, providing internal support to agencies and elected officials to ensure legal and ethical compliance in advocating for the public good. This fiscal year, our Municipal Finance Division has closed nearly $18 billion in bond deals, bringing needed financial resources to the city. Through the work of our Affirmative Litigation Division, in the first half of this fiscal year, we recovered over $30 million for the city and city entities. This includes monetary recoveries for property damage, breach of contract, anti-youth vaping, and opioid settlement payments, among other things. In addition, collection law firms supervised by the Law Department recovered another $12.8 million. We also anticipate saving the city over $100 million this fiscal year in payouts from the Judgment and Claims Fund through our continuing activity to compel insurance companies to defend and indemnify the city. In these cases, we are enforcing coverage for lawsuits arising out of the work performed by private contractors and permittees. Every case that an insurance company steps up to defend is a case that does not have to be defended by city lawyers, thus saving enormous legal resources. Settlements and judgments paid out by insurers in cases falling within the policy coverage also save the city substantial sums. As of January 2025, the Affirmative Litigation Division has saved more than $3 billion since the start of this program in the late 1990s. A further example is our Commercial and Real Estate Litigation Division, which defends the city in a wide range of contractual disputes. In FY24, the division saved the city $60 million by resolving $90 million worth of claims for $28 million. Similarly, our Tax and Bankruptcy Division's defense of real property tax assessments protected $76 million in property tax receipts in FY24, and almost $51 million during the first half of FY25. A large focus of our work this fiscal year has been addressing ongoing challenges in our city, as well as advising on asylum seekers, including the evolving landscape of federal policy and enforcement, and potential challenges to grant funding the city receives. Led by our executive team, a multidisciplinary group of attorneys from across several Law Department divisions continue to provide critical and timely legal advice to the mayor, city agencies, and independently elected officials. For example, the Law Department recently brought a lawsuit seeking to recover $80 million in grant funds that were improperly clawed back by the federal government. These efforts by the Law Department support the city as it faces existing and new challenges while ensuring compliance with federal, state, and local laws and rules. As you are aware, our office works side by side with council staff on crafting legislation. We also represent the council when local laws are challenged. We were pleased to represent the City Council's interest in the non-citizen voting law case including before this state's highest court. The law department represents the city and its employees in litigation in more than 70,000 cases annually. We have experienced an increase in pending cases, particularly in our largest division, tort, where there are now more than 31,000 pending cases, including a large number of Adult Survivor Act and Child Victims Act cases. The tort caseload remains steady this year due to our ongoing efforts to efficiently address case backlog. For example, the Universal Legal Search Tool discussed last year continues to help significantly reduce the backlog of discovery motions, including motions to strike the city's answer in cases in which the city otherwise has a meritorious defense. Additionally, within this fiscal year, we have made advances in rebuilding following the unprecedented level of attrition we have talked about in past years. Nonetheless, growth of new and challenging cases remain a concern as our mitigation efforts continue. Notably, we continue to address the influx of hundreds of cases brought against the city pursuant to the Child Victims Act, the Adult Survivors Act, and the Gender Motivated Violence Act. Look-back periods reviving time-barred claims for these three acts have resulted in claims with an estimated value of more than $1 billion. The Family Court Division is the second largest division in the law department, with our largest prosecutorial practice. Its mission is twofold: through juvenile justice and interstate child support. We are the presentment agency for all juvenile justice, adolescent offender, and interstate child support cases referred to the New York City Family Courts. Under the rehabilitative mandate of the Family Court Act, the Family Court Division must work to achieve outcomes that serve the needs of each individual youth brought before the court, while at the same time protecting the interest of crime victims and ensuring the safety of the community at large. Our family court attorneys work in approximately 30 locations, 365 days and nights a year, including nights, weekends, and holiday operations. The number of serious matters handled by the Family Court Division continues to rise. In 2024, juvenile justice cases referred increased by 20%. 70% of the referrals represent felony charges. This is in addition to the 52% in case referrals in 2023. New York City continues to experience a high volume of cases surrounding violence and the possession of firearms. In 2024, there were 411 firearm cases referred to the division. Mirroring a national trend, child support case referrals, after a recent increase, decreased this year by approximately 8%. My testimony today provides a limited survey of the very broad and varied legal work performed by the law department. By keeping the interest of all New Yorkers at the center of our work, we can do what is right and reinforce the trust in government, and that is our core commitment. I thank you for your support of the law department and look forward to our continued collaborations. I and my colleagues would be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you so much. If I do court counsel, is that a good way to?
That is fine.
Great.
Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you for that thoughtful testimony and that thorough testimony. I'd like to just start with staffing. The preliminary plan included 1,454 full-time positions budgeted for FY25 and 1,510 for FY26. As of January, the law department's actual headcount was 1,373. which leaves 81 vacant positions for the current fiscal year, a 5% vacancy rate. But if we factor in the 341 positions that Mayor Adams cut from the Law Department's budgeted headcount, the real vacancy rate is more like 24%. Prior to the pandemic, the Law Department had 1,774 staff members on board. You're now operating with 400 fewer people, nearly a quarter of the agency. Could you provide an update on how many attorneys and support professionals you currently have on staff?
We have approximately 770 attorneys on staff and 685 legal support professionals.
So we saw a 1% increase in the number of attorneys since a year ago, and a 2% increase in the number of 3% maybe increase in the legal support professionals. Considering how far down we are from the pre-pandemic peak, I continue to be very concerned. Which units have been most impacted by the decrease in staffing over this 5-year period?
In particular, our tort division has been most impacted.
Could you share with us, not today obviously, but in writing, a list of the number of assistant court counsels per unit and how that compares, I think, to the pre-pandemic peak, if you have that?
Yes, we can get that for you.
Thanks, and just don't forget to turn the mic on when you can. Is the Law Department currently subject to the 2-for-1 hiring policy?
For certain positions, yes.
Could you give me a sense of scale? Like for most positions?
For most positions, yes.
For all but a small, is the department overwhelmingly subject to a 2-for-1 policy?
I will refer that question to my colleague, Jen Nagel Endegoen.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
In general, we are subject to the 2-for-1. The exceptions would be new needs we were recently given, so for example, cannabis.
Got it. So with the exception of cannabis, the agency is subject to 2-for-1?
And Child Victims Act, because we have...
And Child Victims Act. So with those two exceptions, which are a very small portion of the total agency's work, overwhelmingly the agency is subject to a 2-for-1.
Everything else is 2-for-1, yes.
It's just, 400 fewer staff, right, from just 5 years ago. The reason I get so upset about this is because when you all are not properly staffed, it slows down the functioning of everything else in city government. I mean, when I worked on the other side of City Hall, I was always kind of shocked by how much had to go through Cheryl's desk or Eric's desk or Amrita's desk. And when you don't have the staff there, it just means that the buildup of things that you have to process is going to take longer and longer and longer. And so every other agency can't do their basic jobs. They can't enforce effectively without guidance on how to do it, or they can't address labor policies without with the guidance on how to do it. I realize your portfolios are bigger now. I just, as previously. Are you in conversations with ONB about lifting the 2-for-1 restriction?
We are always in conversation with OMB on a number of topics.
That was artfully said. Okay. Have you just conducted any sort of analysis on how the decrease in headcount has impacted the law department's ability to operate efficiently? Is there anything that you've looked at that you can share with us or that you've shared with OMB to help make the case for why 2-for-1 should be lifted and why we need significantly new headcount?
Our discussions have not squarely been around 2-for-1 per se, but about where increased resources are needed to meet the needs of the agency. So, for example, if you look at cannabis, for which we have new heads, there was a review done as to what work would be needed and what types of staff were needed to do that work. And so those are the types of conversations we have with OMB. They are around the work.
Right. Okay. I mean, I think that we just have to, I understand that it's easy to make an argument to the public and to the budget director when we don't have enough staff to process food stamps applications or public assistance applications, and that it's slowing up people accessing critical benefits. And you can make that direct correlation a lot more easily. But when we don't have people in the environmental division reviewing things, it gums up the works of city government in all kinds of critical ways that can be a little bit harder to neatly synthesize. And I just wonder what kind of analysis you've done of how the staffing impacts over a period of time where the agency has shrunk so much, how we can better make that argument together to the budget office that we need for the resources we need.
We continue to speak with OMB about all of our staffing needs.
Fair. If we can help, please let us know. I think it's important, and we want to be good partners to the law department so that you have the support that you need. I'd just like to ask about the new staffing needs. So the preliminary plan included $5.5 million in city funding for FY25 and baseline that funding of 4.5 of that funding starting in FY26 for staffing costs. No additional headcount was included with this adjustment. Does it relate to new or existing headcount? And if existing, how many positions does it relate to?
Our Chief of Administration will take that question.
Hello again. So as we move through the year, OMB recognized that some attrition assumptions, I think, that had been baked into their analysis just were not coming true. Our attrition rates are way down, which is great.
That is great. That had been an issue earlier in this administration, right? And Judge Hines Radix, I believe, had made that a big priority, and we've seen improvement there.
Right.
Great. Why?
Well, I think that's enough. You can.
So
Sorry, I didn't give you a chance to answer the question before you piqued my interest.
I think when we were here with Judge Hines Radix, she actually laid it out. We did a review and enhancements to the attorney's salary structure. I think we've seen flexible work obviously be something that both of which have really benefited our agency. And when those two things were implemented sort of in rapid fire, one right after the other at the law department, I think you saw a lot more people choosing to stay. I think it also coincided, somewhat coincidentally, with the managerial retroactive pay increases, right? So all of those things happened in very short order, and the result of that was that our attrition dropped dramatically, which of course thrilled us.
Great. And was there more that you were going to add on?
Slightly. So when OMB recognized that, they basically moved to fill the gap.
Okay. I know I'll shift to Councilmember Brewer after this topic. I just want to, we are facing, I think, totally unprecedented threats from the Trump administration. Budgetary impacts, undermining our policies that are undermining our local laws, our ability to protect the most vulnerable New Yorkers, our water, our air, everything we stand for feels like it's at risk. The law department, of course, is our critical backstop in fighting back against federal overreach and conflict and policies that are in conflict with our values. So has the law department taken any proactive steps to review potential legal threats that the city is facing from the Trump administration? Are you expanding staff capacity to litigate and protect New Yorkers against the kind of chaos coming out of Washington?
We most definitely have taken proactive steps. As I mentioned in my testimony, we have a multi-divisional team that looks at various questions. That's in addition to items that are examined within our particular divisions, such as, but not limited to, our affirmative litigation and environmental law divisions. We have a number of partners throughout the country with whom we share information and strategy.
At states, municipalities, both?
Both.
Okay.
And other entities. And so we are closely reading, we're closely monitoring. There are places where we are participating as a party, places where we are an amicus, instances where we might be part of a common interest agreement with partners in order to watch a topic, and when the time is ripe, to take the next step.
Do you need sign-off from the mayor to engage with partners in pushing back on issues on do you need sign-off from the mayor or from City Hall when exploring ways to push back against federal overreach or to work with partners on this type of litigation?
Not necessarily. There are certain questions that I do discuss with the mayor, because if there's something that's going to be in the paper the next day, he should hear from me first.
Totally.
And so
bare minimum.
So there are some things that are discussed, but we have 70,000 matters overall, and so every thing that we do can't possibly be discussed.
Is he conflicted out from dealing with any issues relating to the federal government, the Justice Department, as a result of his situation?
I would like to not answer any questions about his personal situation, because we represent only the city, and we make certain that we keep that line very bright.
Totally understood. And I'm not asking about his case. I'm asking if the existence of the case poses a conflict of interest that limits his ability to provide guidance or policy direction on matters that affect the city's dealings with the federal government.
We are very mindful of our ethical obligations, and the law department makes sure that we follow our ethical obligations.
Good. Thank you for that answer. I was relieved that the city decided to file a lawsuit regarding the $80 million in migrant funds that was stolen from the city's bank accounts. Could you provide an update on the status of that lawsuit? Do you have sufficient resources to fight that out?
It is still in the very early stages. We sought emergency relief, which was not granted. And part of the reason it was not granted is that we were seeking money, and typically money is not given on an emergency basis in any type of court proceeding.
Fair.
And so we will continue to vigorously fight the matter, though, and recover our funds.
Great. Do you anticipate any new needs in this budget process to ensure that you have adequate staff for the looming range of federal challenges that we're facing? If they decide to rescind more funds, they seek to tie funding to values that are anathema to the people of New York City, sanctuary city status, et cetera, efforts to undermine the LGBTQ communities in New York. Do you have the staffing resources you need to fight back?
We have been in conversation frequently with OMB on our needs, particularly with respect to the changing landscape. If more is needed, we will definitely request more.
I found the Trump administration's attacks on private law firms to be chilling, and I was really saddened by how Paul Weiss folded this week, and I think agreed to $40 million worth of pro bono services at the Trump administration's behest. We rely a lot on pro bono partners in New York City. Do you believe that will be able to access support from pro bono attorneys and the law firms of New York on federal cases, or is that landscape now muddled?
It depends on the particular partners. I have, for matters that I can't discuss here, but I have talked to people who are at mid-size or smaller firms who are glad to be of assistance.
Great. That's good to hear. We should recognize folks who are willing to step up. I will pause here if Councilmember Brewer would like to jump in.
Thank you. First of all, thank you for all your response to our many letters. You are prompt, and I appreciate it very much. I write a lot of letters, and I appreciate the response. A couple of things. You mentioned, I think, when you were speaking, that you hire firms to do collections, and you collected quite a bit. So why wouldn't you expand that unit because there are so many unpaid fines and fees? The reason I'm interested in this, I'm always contacting IBO to get the list of unpaid fines and fees, and it's always pretty high. Much of it, of course, is finance, but you do your own. So I just was wondering why you wouldn't hire more to do more collection.
There are 3 or 4 firms, and they basically get paid based on how productive they are. And the work comes out of Department of Finance and other agencies for whom we collect unpaid debt. If we get to the point that bringing on another firm would be of a financial benefit.
A cost benefit.
Yeah, to a firm, we certainly will do that.
Okay, because it does seem to me that last time I checked, it was about 3 years ago, and it was like $2.1 billion total. It's a lot of money. Second, cannabis, my favorite topic. So I think the plan says that you spent 1.4 in fiscal 25 and 2.8 baseline in 26 for 25 cannabis enforcement positions. So I just want to know what the role of the law department is as it relates to the laws and enforcement. It's a fluid situation, I think, because you have, I take a lot of responsibility and glee from closing with the sheriff a lot of the illegals, and I'm pleased that there are some new legals, but there's a lot in there. Not just sort of break down the new positions, some of the funding issues, and what you think will be the future. How is the anticipated revenue compared to our expenditures? Like, how much are we spending, and is it, worth it?
I will introduce our response and then yield to my very learned colleagues for follow-up. And so,
the cannabis experts.
Yes, the cannabis experts. The need for staffing is in multiple divisions because there are a variety of ways that we assist in the work. There's work from our legal counsel division that provides a lot of counseling on detailed policy matters as to how things are rolled out. Our administrative law and regulatory litigation division assist with practical implementation of those laws, and as well as the various Article 78s and other proceedings that are brought as a result of closures. We anticipate there will be false arrest claims brought in state and federal court, and so there are lines there for tort and special federal litigation. There's also a line for appeals because we anticipate a number of appeals to escalate to that point of litigation. And I will now have Cheryl Neufeld, who is an expert in cannabis, to share more.
Well, thank you, Corporation Counsel. All right, thank you, Corporation Counsel. I do believe you covered most of it. I can say the work that I have been involved with sort of at the executive level is coordinating, as Corporation Counsel said, on the various regulatory policies. We implemented a number of rules. The Administrative Law Division has somewhere between 70 and 100 Article 78s that they've done so far. A number of them have been orders to show cause with very quick return dates and applications for temporary restraining orders. They have not been successful on all, but have been successful on a majority, as well as our colleagues in the Appeals Division, who has had to go in on very quick appeals on cases where judges might not have agreed with the city's position. So,
wow, that's a lot.
It has been a busy time.
Do you have some sense of what the revenue will be as going forward? And then how much are you just spending on enforcement so far, just generally? In other words,
those are questions better answered by our colleagues at our partner agencies, the Sheriff's Office, the Police Department. We aren't involved in the issuance of the summonses or the collection efforts there too, but I am confident they have that information.
okay. Next question is just charter revision. There are two charters, as you know, competing or complementary. It's not clear. And so I go testifying in all of them, having no idea what will end up on the ballot. But I think there is money associated with your agency and their existence. So I just want to know how the funding amounts were determined. Are you working on both or just the mayor's charter? And what's your role in charter revision commissions? It's a little strange at this moment.
I will start, and then I will yield to our Chief of Administration for more information. Historically, money has been put in the law department's budget for charter revision commissions, I think mostly because it's a convenient place to put it. And so a charter revision commission may decide that they need to hire a firm to do an information campaign for the electorate. That firm would be paid by the law department, even though the law department would not have any actual connection to retaining that firm, but we are holding the money. And so that is why you see funds in our budget for charter revision. Separate from that, our legal counsel division provides a wealth of counseling to charter revision commissions on how mechanically, if I have missed any detail.
The only detail I think that I could provide additionally is the way the amounts are determined for the 2024 Charter Commission funding, Charter Revision Commission funding. That was just the amount that was still owed. I think that was primarily for the advertising campaign surrounding the election in November, and that was a current fiscal year cost, so they didn't fund that before. As far as the other one, that is the 2025 Charter Revision Commission amounts, that was just the estimate, is subject to revision later.
Okay. So you don't have anything to say about which ballot proposals end up on the ballots, which is what's going to be the real issue?
No, we do not.
Okay, all right, thank you.
But you'll consult on the language of the ballot
Only if
questions.
someone asks us a question. We are support.
Right. When I was on the other side, we went back and forth with Spencer and others on the wording of every sentence very, very carefully. But one more just cannabis follow-up to Councilmember Brewer. Ms. Neufeld, are there any, I realize it's the agencies that are doing the enforcement day to day, but are there any limitations that you've seen in state law or areas where there's a need for greater flexibility or things that you would highlight for us to ensure that we can consistently shut down illegal cannabis operators? Are there any roadblocks that we're encountering on a consistent or, a recurring basis?
I will say what I can say publicly, which is there is a current decision which you might be aware of regarding enforcement of places that sell hemp and how the city can or can't enforce in those locations. That's a public decision. There are further legal avenues that we're going to be exploring with the courts on that, but that is a current subject that we're thinking about.
Okay. And in addition to hemp, there isn't any, you feel like we have been empowered appropriately as a city to enforce against illegal cannabis shops?
So some of those touch on areas that are covered by privilege discussions, but it's always something that we're thinking about to make sure we're using the law the best way that we can and advising the agencies in that way.
Okay. If there are changes that you think we should be pursuing,